Dear ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, friends of Belarus and the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, welcome from me. Under our roof, we are gathered today to be part of the Berlin-Belarus Future Forum. My name is Alexei Yusupov. I work for the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, and before I will hand over to Ms. Kampmann to give her opening remarks, some technical arrangements since we want to spend half a day together here in this building. You will have noticed that at the entrance there are two very friendly colleagues of mine who are distributing no photo stickers. I mean, you know, and if you don't know, you will learn during this event that the context of Belarus work remains complicated, and it means that personal risks and safety are very important to us. So if you do not want to be photographed, put the sticker visibly on your cloth, and our photographer will take mention of it. There she is at the back, and will not document your presence here. And also, if you take photos privately for yourself, please be aware of this wish of others to not be on your pictures. This is important to us. Second of all, you see some cameras here. Two of the cameras to the left and to the right are actual cameras for the Zoom connection we will have during the second panel. I mean, of course, Amazon Global Web Services have their shutdown today, and so some of you might have mentioned that Signal was not working, Zoom was not working, other services were not working. At the moment, the systems are all green, but we'll see later on. There is one more camera in the back, and that will be recording the stage, and only the stage, so that later on, one of our partner organizations will be able to put it online, and you can see or forward it to people you think should see what was said here, who are not able to be here today. So there is a chance that your back and your head might be in the picture, but not your faces. The event is obviously in English, as you can see, and it has been advertised like this. This is a decision to make it the most inclusive in Berlin, and I hope this will be sufficient. We will be talking slowly here on the panel, and if you still do need any help, you can address me or my colleagues, and we'll try to assist you in your participation. There will be drinks and food later on after the concert we're offering you. It will be taking place on the same floor just behind the staircase, so you don't need to leave anywhere. The wardrobe is there, the toilets are here, there is an open Wi-Fi you can use, which is secure. And this is pretty much all I want to say. One more thing remains to me. I would like to thank all of the co-organizers. If you go to the left, you will see some roll-ups and banners from other organizations, and they're all listed here. It has been an effort just by the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, but as you can see, Task Force Belarus, deutsch-belarusische Gesellschaft, Scholars for Belarus, Science at Risk, Razam, Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung, Friedrich-Naumann-Stiftung, and Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung had gathered their forces to make this happen, and I think this is important and also part of the message. That being said, I'm very happy to give the floor to Ms. Kampmann. Ms. Kampmann is a member of the leadership of the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, the executive board, and a member of the State Parliament of North Rhine-Westphalia, the industrial heartland of Germany, and very much looking forward to your remarks. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Your Excellency, Mr. Latushka, representatives of the United Transitional Cabinet, members of German Bundestag, and all friends and partners of democratic Belarus. The Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung is honored to host this year's event here in Berlin, not as the exclusive organizer, we just see that, but as part of a broad alliance spanning civil society, academia, and politics. This is the second Belarus Future Forum, a platform jointly organized by 10 institutions, including 4 political foundations united in one goal: to imagine and prepare for a democratic future for Belarus. The name of the event speaks for itself. It represents a European forward-looking framework of solidarity and policy engagement. We all share one hope, namely that one day another such forum will be held, this time in a free and democratic Minsk. Let me express our deep appreciation to all those who have made this forum possible. Belarusians, Germans, and European partners alike. Some of you have been involved in the dialogue, in the Belarus dialogue for decades. Others have joined this effort only recently, but all of you share the conviction that cooperation is stronger than resignation. At first glance, Belarus may appear frozen in time, caught between the crushed hopes of the 2020 protests and the war launched in 2022. But this apparent stability is merely political facade. The freeze conceals immobility of fear, exile, and repression. 5 years on, independent voices remain silenced, civic organizations are banned, and space for public life has all but disappeared. As of mid-2025, thousands of political prisoners remain behind bars. Some have been released through international mediation, but structural repression remains in place and new arrests continue under the guise of administrative sanctions, which often elude international attention. Minsk now uses selective pardons to signal flexibility abroad, and it fills us with a genuine joy to see old partners and friends, such as trade union leader Alexandre Yarashuk, now free. We sincerely hope for further releases soon. But we must be clear, there has been no real thaw inside Belarus. These so-called pardons are, in a sense, forced expulsions. The rules of the same game inside the country remain rigid and uncompromising. We are honored to welcome representatives of the Belarusian democracy movement here at this forum. We are particularly pleased to welcome Pavel Latushka, whose courage and leadership continue to inspire so many. We will continue to support them in their struggle for free and fair elections and for an end to repression and police violence in their homeland. The majority of Belarusians did not choose this path or this war. Many continue to resist quietly, ingeniously, often invisibly, keeping the idea of a democratic Belarus alive. In recent weeks, Zapad 2025, the joint Russian-Belarusian military exercises have stirred deep concerns across Europe. Its scale and rhetoric remind us that Belarus remains a potential source of danger. Once again, Minsk has demonstrated how tightly it has bound its own future to Moscow's military agenda. On one side stands a regime that, in exchange for Kremlin support, has chosen to become, at least indirectly, an accomplice in the attempt to upend Europe as we knew it. On the other stands a Belarusian society that voted differently in 2020, that protested for dignity and democracy, and that does not support this war. Our obligation to these people today is to keep alive the vision of a future Europe in which our people will again live as neighbors peacefully and freely. Looking back, we know that such changes can take time. Years, even decades, but Germany's own experience teaches us never to give in to fatalism, because change may be just around the corner. The EU sanction regime imposed on Belarus is now largely aligned with that imposed on Russia, especially regarding export controls and financial transactions. The purpose of these measures is clear: to hold accountable those responsible for human rights violation and election fraud, to end the repression of the opposition. But sanctions alone cannot define our relationship with Belarus. Pressure must be matched with principle and solidarity. In July 2025, the German government temporarily suspended humanitarian admission procedures for politically persecuted Belarusians. This affected the issuance of humanitarian visas. The decision was taken for reasons unrelated to Belarus itself, but caused deep concern among those who depend on such protection. Through appropriate channels, the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung and other co-organizers of this forum raised their concerns about the unintended consequences of this decision. We all hope that the Federal Foreign Office and the Federal Ministry of Interior will soon reinstate and proceed with the swift processing of such visas in the future. Even while maintaining a firm foreign policy line and comprehensive sanctions, we must never punish the Belarusian people for the actions of a president whom Germany no longer recognizes. The Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung continues to work with Belarusian partners even during times when direct work inside the country is impossible. Through research, dialogue, and networks across Europe, we help to keep Belarusian voices present and connected. Our task as Germans, as Europeans, as partners, is to make sure that the democratic Belarusian community continues to find support, dignity, and solidarity. This conviction unites us all. Our shared European future will be complete only when Belarusians too can live freely and without fear, as neighbors, as equals, and as part of a common European home. I sincerely hope that the discussions and working sessions that follow will be fruitful, leading to concrete, actionable strategies and further strengthening our solidarity, with great anticipation for the insights and expertise to come. I now have the pleasure of handing over to Mr. Latushka. Thank you so much for your attention.
Madam Vice Chair of the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, dear colleagues in the democratic movement, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let me thank you for the opportunity to speak at the Berlin Belarus Forum 2025. I would like to thank Germany for its steady support for democratic change in Belarus and for the democratic future of independent Belarus. I would also like to express my gratitude to the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, the Friedrich-Naumann-Stiftung, the Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung, and 10 supporters, as well as the German Federal Foreign Office for organizing this forum. This forum is about the future of Belarus, and I want to start with a question. What will Belarus have no future without? Without independence, Belarus has no future, and yet it is Lukashenko's policy that has damaged Belarus's independence, making it dangerously close to a Russian region. It has transformed our country's territory into a Russian military base and a permanent threat to the safety of Belarusians and our neighbors. Without security, Belarus has no future. It is Lukashenko's policy that brought war to the doorstep of Belarus and the European Union into our airspace. It opened the doors of the Russian army and brought war to Ukraine, where the regime is a co-aggressor. And his hybrid aggression against Europe has built a wall on the border with the European Union. Yes, Europe built the wall to defend itself from aggression, but the architect of that wall is Alexander Lukashenko. And until his policy changes, until we force Lukashenko to change it, security will not return to Belarus, to Ukraine, or to Europe as a whole. Without national identity, Belarus has no future, and it is Lukashenko's policy that has led to the ongoing destruction of everything national, from the language, books, and publishers to symbols and holidays, all to turn Belarus into a mini-Russia for his Kremlin boss. Without civil society, Belarus has no future, and it is Lukashenko's targeted policy that has wiped out nearly 2,000 NGOs in Belarus. Just think, he simply destroyed every organization inside the country that you, democratic nations, and the citizens of Belarus supported. Will he allow these organizations to return to Belarus? Never. He has called all of them extremists or terrorists and opened criminal cases against all members. In place of these organizations, the state is actively creating militarized organizations. These groups stand strongly against all democratic and European values, calling them hostile. At the same time, the door is wide open for pro-Russian organizations. Belarus has no future without independent media, bloggers, and new media. And it is Lukashenko's targeted policy that has led to their complete shutdown inside Belarus. The situation is exactly the same as with NGOs. Without a new generation, Belarus has no future. Lukashenko saw his real support level in 2020. Since then, his targeted policy has actively focused on the brainwashing and militarization of children. From early years, children are forced into military patriotic clubs, groups, and other paramilitary events to raise a generation that hates democracy and is ready for violence and war to defend the dictatorship. Right now, the Lukashenko regime is stealing the future from the country and the Belarusian people, blocking the nation from building a civilized European civil society even years from now. Belarus has no future without a political alternative. This targeted policy of Lukashenko has lasted over 30 years. From the start of his rule, he has used every method to destroy his political rivals. He killed them. He murdered Gonchar, Zakharenko, Krasovsky. He broke up the democratically elected Supreme Council. He has always thrown every potential opponent in jail just for trying to run in an election. And right now, he persecutes all those he could not catch, those forced to leave since 2020. Even here, he plans assassination attempts, issues hundreds of absentia verdicts, adds us to wanted lists, and constantly threatens our health and life. This affects not just direct political rivals, not just the political institution of the Belarusian Democratic Forces, the United Transitional Cabinet and the Coordination Council, but also any active person who opposes the regime. More than 600,000 people have been effectively forced or deported since 2020 from the territory of Belarus. And even after this, the repression against all of us, now cross-border persecution, has not stopped. Here are a few examples. Since the start of this year alone, the Lukashenko regime has opened at least 970 criminal cases against Belarusians abroad, mostly those living in Poland and Lithuania. The United Transitional Cabinet of Belarus has been named a terroristic group by the regime. Lukashenko's investigative committee has opened criminal cases against all 257 candidates who ran in the Coordination Council elections last year. The committee charged every single candidate with 4 sections of the Belarusian Criminal Code. Nevertheless, despite the pressure, the elections took place, for which I am grateful for every participant and voter. It is important for me to emphasize this as the leader of the faction that received the highest number of votes in the Coordination Council elections. Sentences given in absentia, searches and seizing of property in Belarus, pressure on family members, massive campaigns to discredit politicians and activists, constant threats, planned assassinations, organized attacks, abductions, and disappearances. This is the reality faced by Belarusians in forced exile, the reality faced by the democratic forces. But we are withstanding this attack. We have stood strong for 5 years, and we will keep standing strong. We continue to fight because we know our country does not and cannot have a future without justice. Lukashenko's policy aims to totally destroy the rule of law in Belarus and turn legislation into a tool for state violence. Lukashenko claims there are no political prisoners in Belarus because there are no political articles in the law. But over 1,200 people are officially recognized as political prisoners and are in the regime's jails right now. More than 4,200 people have been called political prisoners since the 2020 presidential campaign began. Over 8,400 people have faced political criminal charges. About 7,120 people have been convicted, and over 4,000 people have been or remain imprisoned for long terms. We must not be fooled by so-called pardons and releases, thinking the regime's policy has changed. The root problem, the repressive legislative practices, has not gone away. That is why Lukashenko locked up even more people to replace those he released. In total, no fewer than 100,000 Belarusians have gone through different forms of the punitive system for political reasons. We cannot call it a law enforcement or justice system. Think about it, that is 100,000 documented cases of state violence since 2020, searches, interrogations, short-term and long-term detentions. I repeat, because of political persecution and the political situation in Belarus, about 600,000 people were forced to leave Belarus. This was due to a targeted state policy to create an atmosphere of terror and fear for anyone who disagreed. And for none of them has justice and fairness been achieved yet. This is true even though international tools and ways to ensure justice can help, at least in part. The situation with the cross-border persecution of Belarusians has reached a scale unseen in Europe. Thanks to the government of Lithuania, this issue is under the first review of the International Criminal Court's Prosecutor's Office. Support of Lithuanians' action from other countries is essential because the scale of the Lukashenko regime's cross-border crimes is huge, and getting justice for the victims and holding those responsible to account is an urgent need. And we, of course, want support of German government. Today, we will talk about the future. I have just highlighted the conditions without which this conversation makes no sense. I hear voices saying, let's just agree with Lukashenko. Let's admit defeat. Let's give him everything he wants and in return accept the minimum he will agree to. The language of deals and bargaining has been heard often lately. I ask, can a deal be called good if its foundation in the denial of a future for Belarus? The future is not about tactics. It's about strategy. Lukashenko's regime's strategy is completely clear. What's more, this strategy is an integral part of Russia's strategy. So I ask again, can a deal be called good if it is based on turning Belarus into a mini-Russia and an anti-Europe? The Lukashenko regime is not only unable to create anything else, but it has no intention to. All his policies and actions prove this. Was he provoked? This opinion also exists. But this is called victim blaming. It is the same as saying that a robber was provoked by someone's riches, a rapist by someone's beauty, and a murderer by someone's will to live. Belarusians are a people who are truly rich and beautiful in spirit, morality, and values. And we truly want to live in a free, independent, democratic, and peaceful country. No one can blame us for this, but this is exactly what Lukashenko accuses us of. He lacks all these qualities and pathologically hates everyone who possesses them. He pathologically hates the people who carry the values commonly called European, even though these values are universal. But hatred can never be the way out. And everything I have listed, all the necessary conditions for Belarus to have a future, all of his completely aligns with the desires of the majority of Belarusians, with our values and with our definition of Belarus as a state where the Belarusian people want to live. And all of this is the subject of a national dialogue. This dialogue is necessary for our country, for our people. To escape this is no longer just a crisis, but a political dead end, a dead end of terror, degradation, and hatred for dissent that Lukashenko has driven our country into with his policy. Changing this policy is the goal of the national dialogue. I am sure that Belarusians as a people are ready for it because they have all the qualities of a party that is ready for negotiation and honesty, which are needed for a true dialogue. Belarusians proved that this in 2020 by holding massive but purely peaceful protests against fraud. In 2021, when they voted for a national dialogue to overcome the crisis. In 2022, when despite the ongoing state violence and terror, they still came out for peaceful protests against the war. But Lukashenko had no other answer of any of society's demands except to make the repression even harsher, create an even greater divide between the government and society, and lead the country into an even deeper dead end, dragging it into war and pushing Belarus' sovereignty to the very brink of being lost. Today, Lukashenko says he is ready for a big deal with the United States, and he wants Europe to be part of this deal. His envoys, as we know well, are knocking on Europe's doors. He wants a big deal with the West, but he has no big deal for Belarusians. A deal in his mind is a deal with him where he seeks to solve his own problems, and only his own, without any real change in policy or solving the internal Belarusian crisis. He wants sanctions lifted to escape accountability, gain international recognition, and return to business as usual. What is he trading in this deal? Hostages, political prisoners, his false rhetoric of peacekeeping, hoping to sell Minsk III to the United States, Europe, and Ukraine. In exchange, he wants what I said above. At the same time, he openly shows that his internal policy, that is terror and dictatorship, cannot be a subject for any discussion. He has no intention of talking with the democratic forces who represent the aspirations of the majority of Belarusian society. And I return to the language of deals. Can a deal be considered good when its foundation is the Lukashenko regime denying a future for Belarus? Because if the status quo is kept and his policies don't change, Belarus has no future. And most importantly, can you really make any global deal with someone who is unable to make a deal inside his own country? If Lukashenko refuses a national dialogue, refuses to talk with democratic forces, and refuses to solve the internal Belarusian crisis, can he be trusted as a partner in a bigger crisis-solving dialogue? The answer is clearly no. Without an agreement with society, there can be no external deals. Because one of the main causes of the global crisis is actually located in Belarus. Without changing the situation inside Belarus, and that means without changing the regime's repressive internal policy, any solution to the global crisis will not be lasting. It will not be strategic, because strategy is about the future. The West has already tried tactics many times with Lukashenko, and we can see the result of those tactical choices. It is, to put it mildly, unsatisfactory. The only way to ensure a strategic solution to the crisis is a national dialogue. A real national dialogue, not a fake one. And in this dialogue, the democratic forces must be the subject, not the object. Otherwise, the internal Belarusian crisis will not be solved. Without the pro-European democratic forces taking part in the country's political life, there will be no policy change. Crucially, there also will be no checks and balances, nothing to counter Russian influence in Belarus. Simply put, If there is no internal Belarusian deal, there will be no guarantee for the success of any big deal you make. It is important to remember that only the Belarusian people can act as a guarantor for the execution of any deal, the guarantor of peace and security. The anti-war stance of Belarusian society, this national consensus, is the first line of defense for Europe against the direct aggression of the Lukashenko regime. To leave Belarusian society out of the big deal, to leave it alone with Lukashenko and the Kremlin, means giving up the guarantee of security. A deal without strategic guarantees is an empty deal, and there have been enough such deals with Lukashenko throughout his history of relations to know how they end. What should be done? There is the path offered by those who call themselves pragmatists, to enter a tactical deal. That means a deal on Lukashenko's terms. There is another way, to remember the strategic interests and tools that Europe and the US hold, and to use this as a basis for communication with the Lukashenko regime. Communication from a position of strength, when both Europe and the United States clearly state the conditions for concluding any big deal. And I hope that our Western partners, both European and American, and we ourselves, remember the importance of real, not cosmetic, change to the current policy of the Lukashenko regime, and that the following is necessary: an immediate end of repression, release of all political prisoners, guarantees for the safe return of Belarusian exiles and guarantees against subsequent persecution, security guarantees for opposition politicians and their supporters, legalization of political and civic activities in Belarus, legalization of independent media and their activities in Belarus, stopping the repressive law enforcement practices against politicians and civil society representatives, cancelling the extremist and terrorist labels assigned to politicians, activists, organizations, and media, abolishment of laws and decisions that limit the rights of Belarusians abroad, such as decree on passport, notary requirements, foreign polling stations, final resolution of the migration crisis and end to hybrid war against Europe, stopping all support for Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Otherwise, pressure on the Lukashenko regime must remain and grow stronger, not the opposite. And secondly, that real dialogue, not its imitation, is necessary with democratic forces, our political institutions, the President-elect, the Cabinet, and the Coordination Council, and the most engaged actors of the democratic movement, leading to a round table to conclude the Belarusian deal. Without democratic forces, not the dictator's pocket opposition, dialogue is impossible and cannot be accepted. And it is vital that in the upcoming European Parliament resolution, which I hope will be adopted tomorrow, and which is a truly strong resolution, the European Parliament plans to recognize the role and agency of our institutions. Lukashenko must receive this signal. Without Belarusian deal, there will be no big deal. There will be no lifting of sanctions, no end of the isolation, and no bridges to the West. It is important to remember that the main sanction tools are in Europe's hands. A huge share of Belarus's economic interests, which are currently lost, are in Europe. And the border with Europe is exactly where the line of isolation for the Lukashenko regime runs today. This is why it is so important for him to include Europe in the big deal. And this is exactly why Europe's position is strong enough to dictate the terms of the deal and to turn it from a tactical one into a strategic one. It is Europe that will soon decide whether it is acceptable to negotiate about us without us. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Latushka, you've agreed to answer some questions, and we will do this. Whoever wants their questions to be heard, please also come into the room, so the people behind the room, I cannot really see and recognize you. There will be 2 colleagues going around with microphones, so I need a show of hands if there are any questions that urgently needs to be answered, and we have a good modicum of time, 15 minutes to do that. So are there any questions in the room at this current moment?
Everything was clear so, during discussion.
No, but also, you know, it's always hard to be the first one, and you also still think about what you've heard, so...
Nothing about us without us.
Yes, I can see a question to the left. I can see a Markus Meckel.
Thank you very much, Markus Meckel. I'm thankful for your position, for your clear position in solidarity with Ukraine, which is, I think, very, very important to make clear that Democrats, wherever they live, and even from Belarus in this case, from Russia in other case, stand with Belarus, and we should increase our pressure towards Russia. Thank you for that. I have the question about the political prisoners. It is always the question how to deal with that, to bring people out. We can be thankful that some was possible in the past and there was a success, but as you mentioned, there are a lot of political prisoners in Belarus, and it is a question in which way it can be dealt with that by talks on the one hand, and what to give for that. We know the Russians playing with that. We know Lukashenka, that is not possible to trust. On the other hand, he is trying the shadow of independency to have a link with him personally. Is this a way to talk on special levels for him, especially to bring people out, or what do you think? Has it an influence to him? Can you describe your position in this way?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your question. Of course, for us, for Democratic Forces, is the main priority to release all political prison in Belarus. It's drama, personal drama for many people. It's drama for all of us, for our nations, that we have so many thousands of political prisoners imprisoned in Belarus. Also, my cousin Anatoly Latushka sentenced for 6 years, and he is a political prisoner. But Lukashenko want to trade of hostages. It's like European Hamas. He wants to trade people, life of people, and to sell them for our partners. We support all attempts of United States, their communication with the Lukashenko regime to free as many political prisoners as they can. So let's give this chance for Americans to push this topic and to free as many political prisoners as you can. It is one of the priorities, freedom for political prisoners. But strategic priority is to change situation inside of the country. If not, if Lukashenko don't want to stop repressions, if he don't want to change internal situation, near future we will have new political prisoners. And today, what we have is very, very bad statistic. So he imprisoned more people than he released political prisoners. That is why first stage in the hands of Americans, let them do their job to free as many as they can. And the second step in the hands of European Union, to push him to stop repression and to change internal policy and foreign aggressive policy, because he is still supporter of Russia in the war against Ukraine.
Thank you very much. If you had time, I would recognize this lady in the middle, and then we'll pass the microphone to you.
Hello, my name is Salome Japiashvili. I'm an interpreter and moderator from Georgia. I just wanted to thank you first of all, for your great speech, and also to ask you how you see the situation in the regional context, since in Georgia the situation is also getting worse and worse and on the path of autocracy. And we know from some journalistic investigations that the Georgian special forces maybe went through some exchange of experience with Belarusian special forces. So maybe the resistance should also have some collaboration. I know on the personal level, activists exchange, so to say, the strategies and so on. Is there any kind of more deepened collaboration between the resistance platforms of Georgia and Belarus? Thank you very much.
If I can exchange my practice as one of the activists of democratic forces of Belarus with you, special services exchange their practices and we can exchange our practices. My recommendation for you, never stop. Never stop. Be active, be strong. And it's not my opinion. One day I met with one ambassador, ex-general of NATO, and he said to me, before their revolution in their country, 2 days before, they were sure that they will never win. But 2 days later, they had this victory. So never stop, firstly. Of course, it's a huge cooperation between KGB and special services of Georgia. It's difficult for our Belarusian citizens to receive a status of refugees in Georgia. We understand that today in Georgia they have pro-Russian policy. But I remember my interview before the 2022 in Deutsche Welle. I said the best way how to stop Russia in their aggressive policy to unite all countries around Russia. Пролетарии всех стран, соединяйтесь. You understand Russian, yeah? So I said this in Russian, and so if West want to stop Russia, their imperialistic ambitions, it's very important to support all neighboring countries around Russian Federation. And it will be a strong message for Russian elites and for Russian society. But I explained during my meetings with our partners in Europe that it is one of the priorities for European diplomacy, also for American diplomacy, but it's difficult today to understand what's the strategy of American diplomacy.
Thank you so much. Workers of the world unite is something we hear with joy here in this room. We've had a question here in the second row, and then we go to the right. Yeah.
Andrei Novak, Alliance for European Security, Berlin. You've made such a strong case for, being part of the any potential deal, and you've made very clear demands for the future of Belarus, as you would like to see it. And to me, it's reminiscent of what happened in Germany in 1989, and obviously with Round Table and so on. And obviously, Putin considers this the geopolitical catastrophe what followed the fall of the Soviet Union. And we are supposed to take a strategic approach in Europe, which I totally agree with. But it seems to me that the strategy of the Kremlin is to keep Belarus under control, and it seems to me a vital interest of the Putin regime that if it were to lose Belarus geopolitically, could threaten the regime itself. So it seems it's quite like a Gordian knot situation. How do you propose to solve this? Do you think European strength could be the deciding factor? Thank you.
Thank you so much. We study experience of different countries. First of all, we study experience of Poland of Round Table, and on that base we initiated this idea as United Transitional Cabinet. It's our common idea, accepted by Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, and all members of United Transitional Cabinet also present here to propose this national dialogue or round table for regime. But I'm pragmatic. I understand that Lukashenko will reject it. I understand, but it's also a message for elites around him. I know very well Prime Minister, I know many ministers, they are still in the power in Belarus, so maybe it's a perspective, a strategic perspective on the day when this day will come. And I can divide elites in our country on three parts. One part of members of the government, Lukashenko's administration, they want to live an independent state. The second part, they want to live in an independent state, and they are pro-democratic oriented people. They never will tell openly today, but I know them. I'm sorry. In private meetings, many I had with them when I was a minister, ambassador. And third part is pro-Russian elites. It's a main threat for us. So that is why we need to send this message for first part and the second part of elites. What we want to have independent states. What sociologically we received result of sociological
survey.
Yeah, 97% of Belarusians want to live in an independent state. I understand the ambitions of Russia. I understand what they're doing now. That is why when our partners asking me which way we can support you, assist you in your democratic movement, my answer is you can buy F-35 or Mirage or Rafale. But no, of course it's not true what I'm telling. What is the price of one F-35? $150 million. Let's invest that money to Belarusian society. If Belarusian society want to live in an independent state, want to live in a democratic state, will be pro-European, it means that it will be guaranteed that we will survive, that we will have this sovereignty and we will rebuild our independence. It's very important because now we are struggling with the big machine of propaganda, huge machine of propaganda, Russian propaganda and pro-Russian Lukashenko's regime propaganda. It's very difficult. People are demotivated, people under repressions and risk to be detained for arrests for relatives in Belarus, so it's difficult. But your support, European support in such strategic moment for us is very important.
Thank you. Lisa, fourth row. Could you raise a hand? Yeah.
My name is Frank Hoffer. I'm from the German trade union movement, and I'm also working with Solidarność, which is the organization of Belarusian trade unions in exile. In the last time, we have seen that the unconventional US policy delivered some results, while the more principled European stand for the last 5 years has not had an impact on Belarus. But we have to see that Belarusians more closely economically, politically allied with Russia than 5 years ago. So my question to you is, if you think about yourself as the head of the European Union, what in the European policy would you change to make a difference?
Oh, so many propositions. First of all, mobility for Belarusian, not close borders for Belarusian, visas programs, because Belarusian as a nation, they are European nation. Culturally, historically, we want to have this communication. If you're close cross-border points for people, I'm coordinator of the sanction policy in the United Transitional Cabinet, so I am for maximum pressure on regime. And today, as I said, we have this small window of opportunities because we have you have in your hands this huge, big instrument of sanctions. But it's one way to more pressure on Lukashenko, but the second way to be more open for Belarusians, to propose cultural programs, educational programs. If not, Belarusians will go to Moscow and St. Petersburg. Russians propose so many scholarships for Belarusians, and because they want to have pro-Russian oriented nation in Belarus. So my proposal for European Commission, open borders for people, more visas for people, education programs, cultural programs, and support independent media information. It's our ammunition today.
Thank you very much. We have time for one more question. but it seems the questions have been answered.
Thank you.
Ms. Latushka, thank you
you
very
so
much. A round of applause. We'll go on to our first panel, and I give over to my colleague Gabriele Baumann from the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung.
I would like to come to ask the panelists, Gabriele Freitag, Sir Michael Novak, Artyom Schraibman, and Juri Kazakevich. Thank you. Gehen Sie mit Herrn Latushka dann zu dem Termin um 4? Ja, kurz, dass er Bescheid weiß. Ja. Und ja. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Gabriele Baumann, and I am representing the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation, as it was said, the office working on Belarus, based in Vilnius since 2007. And since that time, we have been conducting a very intense program. So, but it's always, something is always changing. So this time we would really like to also discuss on what just has been said, the question of if we can actually forward the dialogue between Belarus, between the Belarusian democratic forces and the European Union, and what could we actually achieve. So I think this is a topic which we started to discuss, and we had some questions in that regard already. I would say a few words in the beginning, and then forward to our panelists. We have time, I think 1 hour 15 minutes, and then of course I will give you also the possibility to ask some questions. So the question why we are here, we all know we want a free and democratic Belarus in the future. I think that's very, very clear. There is still hope that we can achieve it. And there will be definitely a time and a scenario after Lukashenko. This is what we assume, this is our assumption in the first place. And it has been said already that Belarus is a source of military threat. So this is why we as European Union, as Germany, we need to think about what we can do in order to lower this security threat. This year, 2025, and this is why I said there has been a lot, again, of dialogue and focusing on Belarus, is because the Trump administration has shifted towards engaging directly with the regime of Lukashenko, trading selective prisoner releases for a high-level dialogue. So this has happened on the track USA Lukashenko, and even as far as I understood, when these talks happened, even the foreign ministry of Belarus was not present at these talks. It was the head of the KGB. So we had some prisoner releases, but the question is really, and this is the question I would like to talk about, does that mean that the European Union should follow the US track to deal with the regime in order to ease the humanitarian crisis? Of course, these releases, there have been humanitarian victories for all of us, but we should not forget that we still have a probably growing authoritarian regime in Minsk. Because since 2020, the repressions never stopped, and they rather became worse. So many experts say, and this is a matter to discuss, of course, that the European Union must not copy Washington's approach or repeat as, I mean, I can quote some, but probably from the Finnish Institute of International Affairs I've been working with my previous engagement. They say it's a mistake of re-engagement with the regime of Lukashenko. So granting Minsk legitimacy without enforcing conditions has, despite numerous attempts, never been sustainable over the last decades. I mean, there are many people in the room who have been working on Belarusian affairs for many, many years, and they know this. They know the history of dealing with Lukashenko, and because Lukashenko has been in power for 31 years now, so quite a long time. And many of us were also surprised when Trump called Lukashenko in August a highly respected president, because this is not what we as Europeans would say, and he also accepted an invitation to Minsk. So to some extent, this undermines European efforts to isolate the regime politically and economically. But we have these changed premises, we have the US track, so it is more than ever necessary to find an answer to the following question: what could be a new European strategy towards Belarus? Who has to be included into this strategy? And what can be done to reduce the regional security risks which emerge from Minsk, and also to lower its dependence on Moscow? And at the same time, what can we do in order to improve the chances of Belarus for a future democratization and closer ties with Europe? This is a strategic task for us. So it doesn't have to be necessarily to be a big deal. I think this is really something we always talking now about big deals. But maybe it is a national dialogue. This is what Mr. Latushka proposes, including the democratic forces. So I would like to now give the floor to our first speaker, which is Artyom Schraibman. And he has been working on a roadmap of possible practical and conditional steps for a limited, let's call it de-escalation. Yeah, de-escalation between Belarus and the European Union, under the assumption that the Belarusian regime wants to improve ties with the West. So the paper recommends, it is a paper, and I think we even brought some copies here, which you can take with you if you like. So the paper recommends being prepared for alternative scenarios in Belarus after Lukashenko. So to speed up the process and create preconditions for this, Artyom Schraibman, I would like to take the first floor. I think I don't have to present the speakers because you find them in the program, but Artyom is a political analyst for many, many years from Belarus, now living in Warsaw, and he's also the founder of Sense Analytics, a periodical newsletter. Please, Artyom.
Thank you very much, Gabriele. Thank you for inviting me here. It's a great honor. And indeed, my remarks here will be inspired by the paper that I co-authored with three great Belarusian experts, Andrei Bushil, Ekaterina Deikala, and Dmitry Kruk, and which Kaz kindly supported. It was also inspired in a way by what everybody is talking about here already, and probably will talk for some hours to come, is the US-Minsk dialogue, which is not perfect, which I actually share all the criticisms that have been voiced here by Gabriele, by Pavel, Latushka, when it comes to this dialogue. It leaves some key dilemmas unopened, unresolved, unanswered, I'm sorry. For example, the dilemma of deportations. Some political prisoners who are being released didn't want to go, didn't want to leave the country, being forcefully removed. They had their prison terms nearly expired. They wanted to go home in a month or two, but now they're effectively exiled against their will. And it doesn't seem that Americans are working hard on preventing this from happening. At least we don't have any indications. Hopefully they are, but we are not aware of it. Obviously, the arrests in the countries continue and expand. Number of political prisoners grows, even despite the fact that many of the political prisoners serve their terms entirely and leave prisons. More than 300 political prisoners, I think almost 400, have been pardoned since the middle of last year, and still the number is growing, which means that the repression is unabated. And as far as we know, the repression is also not, at least for now, part of the US Minsk engagement. The dialogue itself seems to me to be a bit chaotic, I would say, as many US foreign policy initiatives these days. Well, maybe it's a feature, not a bug, but this is its feature. It's chaotic, it's not very structured, and I would say that it's strategically it depends on the ability of this administration to focus on our region and on Belarus as such, which is also not a given. And still, with all that said, this is the only approach that has brought tangible results in the form of saved lives. And everybody, including the most hawkish European countries and governments, including the Belarusian Democratic Forces, acknowledge that these are the positive humanitarian victories. So for the EU, I think it sets the dilemma that Gabriele has already alluded to, what to do. I would even sharpen it, if I may, using the right, the privilege to be just an analyst. I think we can sharpen it to a following binary choice. One option is a comfortable and passive observation of what's going on and just waiting until the right conditions inside the country or in the region mature. And secondly, is try to become proactive, but to do it better than the US, to do it more comprehensively than the US. I obviously favor the latter option. And hence the idea of the prototype roadmap that we've created, drafted, recently published on Kaz Belarus website, but also I think printed copies must be available here as well, of roadmap of a possible EU-Minsk step-by-step limited de-escalation. If you don't read the paper and only read the title or the media headlines, of course it may seem that we propose to soften the EU stance. If you read it, of course, the impression might be the opposite one, because we actually set the very ambitious and high bar of expectations of Minsk, and many people already sort of blame us for being unrealistic in what we expect from Minsk. But this is not the proposition to soften the EU stance. This is the proposition how to structure the position, how to structure the EU leverage, and how to use it in communication with Minsk. What can be the conditionality, the stages, what reciprocal steps make sense to include in this limited de-escalation roadmap, and which of them require the regime change in Minsk, to put it very bluntly. Still, the roadmap, I think its advantage is the comprehensive character. So it's not just political prisoners, because if you do not address the mechanism of production of the political prisoners, which is the repression, it is not a sustainable process, because the EU will simply dispose of its leverage and sticks and, ability to influence Minsk, but Lukashenko in this system can just replace the existing political prisoners with new ones. Of course, this will be, still a win for the existing political prisoners, but this is not a sustainable solution for sure. We also include not just repression, but also one element of security problem that Lukashenko regime produces, which is the migrant crisis at the borders of Poland, Latvia, and Lithuania. This, I think, can also be addressed within the de-escalation process that we suggest. So these are the concessions, and there are 7 pages of these steps that we detail that Minsk would need to perform in this process. And of course, on the EU side, it would also include diplomatic steps sectoral dialogues, and other forms of engagement before we even approach the issue of sanctions, which in our case is, again, a very limited menu. Some sanctions, I would say even many and some more important sanctions, are left out of the scope of the roadmap because we realize that if they were lifted in the context of the ongoing war, they would simply strengthen Russia's hand in this war, Russian war machine, and it goes against the logic of our paper, our roadmap, and that's why we propose to leave it for the better day. We also suggest two monitoring mechanisms. One, to monitor the implementation of agreements to exit the humanitarian crisis, basically to stop repression, not to, or to at least soften repression, let's say, at the initial stages. And another monitoring mechanism to monitor the compliance with the exiting of the migration crisis. The first group can include and should include the consultation mechanism with Belarusian civil society in the face of Belarusian human rights groups. And the second mechanism should include the border services of the countries neighboring Belarus from the West, and also Frontex from the EU, and International Organization for Migration as the mediator. And there is also a snapback mechanism that we suggest. Snapback mechanism is an insurance that the EU can have against Lukashenko cheating, because if given choice, he would cheat. I think everybody in this room understands this. So the snapback mechanism implies that the sanctions are not lifted, they are suspended. There is a mechanism in the EU, the legal mechanism that was used on Vladimir Makey, late foreign minister, in 2013, where his personal sanctions against him were suspended for a brief period of time, being subject to further revision every 6 months. I think it is an appropriate mechanism for this process that we suggest. At the same time, our roadmap, I think, is realistic enough to not include all the maximalist expectations that we might have here. EU doesn't have and will not have the leverage to compel Lukashenko to commit political suicide by holding free and fair elections. This just doesn't happen, especially, I mean, in the political history of the world, but especially since the isolation is not complete. Russia supports this regime and many other countries trade with it as well. At the same time, it doesn't mean that the EU should stop demanding this, but it just means that just like the good chunk of sanctions that strengthen the war or strengthen the Belarus's dependency on Russia, like the sanctions on oil products, for example, these issues should wait for the better day and stay outside of the limited process that we suggest. It's very possible, and now I would like to put off my, let's say, author of this roadmap hat and put on back the neutral analyst hat. It's very possible that the time has not yet come for this approach because of the lack of political will on both sides, because we have to be sober about it. For the EU, on the EU side, Belarus is not a priority. It's never been a foreign policy priority, and it's not today. And I wouldn't describe EU policy vis-a-vis Belarus as a strategy. I don't think the EU has strategy vis-a-vis Belarus. It's a chain of reactions and chain of responses to challenges presented by Lukashenko regime. And in general, if you look at the EU foreign policy, I think it has very little institutional capacity to set strategic goals in relations with countries that do not strive to become EU members. And Belarus is definitely one of them. As a result, with such actors like Lukashenko, unreliable and toxic, risk aversion prevails over the desire to proactively reach some, albeit limited, results that we suggest. On the other hand, on the Minsk side, it's also clear that Minsk in turn doesn't seem ready for such a comprehensive dialogue as well. First of all, and I here agree completely with Pavel Latushka, it's such a pity that he left, because it's not like a common experience for me to publicly agree with Pavel, but here I totally agree with him that Lukashenko expects European Union to be guided by the US and for Trump administration to pave a way for necessary decisions in the EU. And this is his current calculation, so he's not in the place to engage in serious communication with the EU. Situation in the economy worsens, but not that catastrophically or drastically. The GDP grows, the growth slows down, but it still grows. Russia is still generous enough to sustain the political survival of this regime for the time being. And maybe the political will in Minsk matures later, it's possible, with negative economic developments accelerating. And we already see, let's say, first early signs of this. I think the waves of pardons of political prisoners is the testament that Minsk is anticipating some problems in its modus operandi in Russia. The quasi-appointment recently reported of Mr. Ambrazevich to be de facto responsible for European vector of foreign policy is also a testament to the same process. A series of track 2 events in Minsk that everybody knows but nobody speaks publicly about that have been happening since May. Also, I think a testament to this emerging, outreach to the West. But of course, this is still in the very early phases. In any case, we are just the 4 humble analysts behind this paper, and we cannot shape political wills either in the EU, neither in the EU, nor even less so in Minsk. The document can help structure the process when there is a political will on both sides, and to employ it with as few blind spots and as few risks as possible. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very, very much for this talk about the roadmap and how we can bring it forward in order to be discussed. I think this is really, you said, pragmatic steps which have to be done. But can you maybe just one follow-up question? Can you explain whom the EU should address in Belarus? Who is the one who should be addressed? Or who is it? One person, or is it maybe a ministry? Or
well, it depends on the stage. Some preliminary. First of all, channels of communication exist, not just between EU member states, but between the EU as an institution and Minsk as well. Diplomatic channels still exist. So these channels, the recently de facto appointed Ambrazevich to head this effort, I think these people can be contacted and suggested for a possibly high level, possibly closed meeting with Lukashenko, because he's a decision maker in the country, and there is no way around the fact that sooner or later the content of this roadmap or any kind of process needs to be discussed with him or with his, envoy appointed precisely to oversee it, like he had Mr. Rybakov in case of United States, and apparently now Ambrazevich here, but in the end, the buck stops with him. And then the technical implementation of the agreements do not require involvement of Lukashenko every day. It's a technical process, establishment of contact groups with the authorities on necessary levels, communication with MFA, with border services if necessary to resolve the migrant crisis. And I would say with the law enforcement agencies to make sure that the repressive policies that they commit to, if this process develops further, that they commit to halting the repressive practices in question. And as you've seen the roadmap, there are plenty of them that we call to be part of this conversation.
Thank you very much. And before I give you the floor, Mr. Nowak, I would also like to point out that the situation for the European Union is different than the situation for the US, because we share we share a border with Belarus in Europe, and of course the security risks which emerge from Belarus, they are very very present, and also the EU has been investing so much money into Belarus over the last 30 or more years, and also in supporting Belarusian democratic forces. So I think this situation for us, for the European Union, really is different than for the US. So far the EU strategy includes sanctions, it was mentioned, and they have now been extended until early 2026, if I remember that correctly. And they target the electoral fraud in 2020, but of course also 2025, ongoing repressions, and Belarus' role in enabling Russia's aggression. So from a perspective of the European Union, or let's say from the perspective of Germany, what could be done? What could be done? We have just heard about the roadmap, which needs political will. Do you think the EU, do you think Germany is ready to pursue such a roadmap, to have this permanent dialogue on various levels in order to really have another chance of getting Belarus out of the Russian influence and to lower the security risk? I mean, there is a roadmap, there is a political will on side of the democratic forces to be engaged in a national dialogue. So what do you think would be the strategy? Michael Nowak, also I think well known to everybody, has been for a long time with Belarus, with the Foreign Office of Germany in Minsk, and now here in Berlin, and we are very happy to have him on all important sessions on Belarus. So thank you, please, if you could take the floor.
Thank you very much, Ms. Baumann, and thank you to the organizers for putting this together. Very honored to be on this panel. I'm filling in for Niklas Wagner, our East Europe director, who had to cancel on short notice unfortunately. I would like to start out in answering your question that I think the first step is that we really think about a Belarus policy, an approach to Belarus that is not a function of our Russia policy. I myself am head of division for Russia and Belarus, so I myself deal a lot with Russia and the eastern neighbor of Belarus, but I am convinced that we need a specific policy on Belarus. And Artyom said that we didn't have a strategy yet. I'm not sure whether we have strategies on any country, maybe China, we have a China strategy. But I would say that we do have a coherent approach. It, of course, was developed in reaction to what happened to and in Belarus since 2020. We have the Council conclusions. We have from 2020 and also from 2024, and they set out, if you like, a framework of how we deal with the Belarusian regime, but also what we try to offer Belarusian society. And you, Ms. Baumann, outlined the main points of that. So I think if we look at possibilities, you know, how to go forward. I think I read the roadmap document last week, and I found it very useful because it not only structures a possible dialogue that you see, but I would agree that the time has not come for it. But the main usefulness I see is that it structures or attempts to structure the conditions from both sides, and it also, if you like, prioritizes the asks from the Belarusian regime, but also the European side, and how that could be synchronized or put together. So I think to all of those who haven't read it, I can really recommend it. But of course the question is, of course, you know, what then can be implemented in concrete terms, because I think you alluded to a very important aspect is the whole question of sanctions. I mean, sanctions are in place, and for good reason. When we talk about sanctions, I mean, one is sort of influencing or shaping decision-making in Minsk by the regime, by Lukashenka, but a very important factor, and there, unfortunately, our Belarus policy is very closely linked to Russia. We have to think about circumvention. And if you look at the latest deals, certain concessions that would seem to benefit Belavia, for example, they might benefit Russia even more, and that is of course a strategic dilemma or problem that I would see. If we think about, how do we interact with the regime? And first point is that we, as has been said, we have channels of communication, and that's great. We have a functioning embassy on the ground. We have a new chargé d'affaires, Katrin Außensieben, who started at the beginning of October. And of course, we still have a rather limited but Belarusian presence here in Berlin. So there are channels of communication. And I think it is important for us to keep those channels of communication, but see them as a channel of communication, not of dialogue, because dialogue is not in the cards for the moment. It would be lovely to have that, but I think a lot would have to happen before that. But communication is about also outlining very clearly our expectations. And again, I think the roadmap and other documents can help us to communicate even more clearly what we expect from Minsk and the Belarusian regime to happen. And I could imagine, thinking more about how to even, communicate in a more structured way to the regime what we expect from them. That's the first step. And what is clear is, you asked about the German approach. I mean, the German approach will only take place in close synchronization with our European partners. Team Europe is key to this. Of course, the neighboring countries of Belarus, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, but also the other European partners. So that's, if you like, the cornerstone of our approach and our future policy. A very important aspect is the question of accountability. I'm not sure how far it is reflected in the roadmap. That might be an important point to keep in mind. It's not only about lustration, but some of you might know that we, as Germany, are among the founders and also supporters of the International Accountability Platform of Belarus. And I think for the moment the platform is gathering evidence on not only the repressions, but clear violations of international law. And I think this has to be continued. But yeah, in the framework of that, let's think about ways how to communicate our expectations more clearly. Last point, maybe. Pavel Latushka also mentioned it in his speech, and I think that's very important, is to keep the flame alive in Belarusian society. Belarusian society showed in 2020 that a different future for Belarus was possible, was thinkable, was conceivable. So we, of course, will continue to support the democratic forces of Belarus, but also try as much as we can to support civil society. And that has several aspects. It has a financial aspect. It hasn't been mentioned today, but of course, USAID has has reduced or almost completely walked out from its support. So we will see how far we can fill in for that. I think it's clear that we can't fill every gap, but it's an important task. Independent media is crucial, of course. And we recently had a gathering on support not only for media but the civil society, and it was clear that the outreach and the effect, the resonance that independent media have in Belarus is still very much alive. So it's important, but it's also worth it because it really makes a difference. And last point on that, you mentioned that I served in Belarus as well at our embassy, and I think that our embassy in Minsk continues to issue visas to Belarusians who travel to Germany and other European countries. More than 50,000 Schengen visas a year plus national visas. I'm sure my successor, Katrin Ausem-Siepen, will sort of continue this policy, that we try to make people-to-people contacts possible as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you for your very positive remarks. And so there could be a process also backed by the political will, hopefully, of many more states within the European Union. So thank you. So I would like to give the floor to Gabriele Freitag from the German Association. What do you say in English? For Osteuropa East European Studies, German Association for East European Studies. She has been the CEO for many years and has been working exactly, which was just said by Mr. Novak, with the civil society and also with research project, history projects, independent media. So I think I would like to elaborate a bit on that now, because what actually can we do in order, and you mentioned it, what can we do in order to further strengthen concretely the civil society of Belarus in exile, but most probably also within Belarus? And maybe you could just also tell us an example of the cooperation you have done over the last years, because as it was said by Mr. Latushka and you also, that of course all independent NGOs and political parties and cultural organizations within Belarus have basically been dissolved or forced into exile. So what can we do in order to strengthen them here in exile and also to have some influence on civil society, on the society inside the country? And then I would like, at the end, so to say, I would like to come to Mr. Kazakevich in order to explain us a little bit what is actually going on within the country, within Belarus. So please.
Thank you. Yeah. I think I can continue with what Michael Novak just said. Keep the flame alive, I think, is really a hard job, but a very important one. I think what it generally needs is a long-term strategy. Andrei Schraibman, you've just said we cannot expect Lukashenka to commit political suicide. So what we need really is a long-term strategy. And I think we need a very broad scope of actions, and we have to address various groups, various actors, inside and outside the country. And I think this is very important. So yes, for this reason, I would like to talk about the potential impact of that the exile community can have. And it will be very interesting for me then to hear from you to what extent you agree to this and where you see the challenges. First of all, I would really like to stress that we cannot really talk about the exile community, because we have a very diverse range of individuals and organizations active outside Belarus. We have political fractions. I mean, we have the coordinating committee headed by Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya, and I think this is great. This is really an asset for the Belarus opposition. But of course, Pavel Latushka has already mentioned, we do have different views on how to deal with the Lukashenka regime. So I think this is also a process of constant negotiation. We have human rights activists and organizations, and I think they also play a crucial part also to inform us about what's going on inside the country, how is the situation of political prisoners. DGO, by the way, itself also supports a website that documents the fate of political prisoners. Solidarity with Belarus. We have media outlets. They are very, very important, and that has already been mentioned several times. So we have media outlets like Zerkala Nasha Niva, the Association of Belarusian Journalists. We have publishing houses in various countries. So we must not only think about what's going on in Germany, we have to have the broad range of what's going on especially in Europe, outside Belarus. We have cultural organizations like an independent film academy, and film also can play a crucial role to raise awareness, and very important for DGO because we are a network of scholars mainly. We have scholars in exile, and I can talk a bit more about our experience with the Forum for Historical Research on Belarus, with participants coming from Germany, Poland, Lithuania, the Czech Republic, and other countries. So some of you may have seen our logo, and I can give you more information on that later on. And I think we also have to keep in mind that we have had the Belarusian experience of exile over the last 30 years. So we have had various waves of exiles, but only, I think, starting in 2020, we had this really mass movement of people. Latushka just mentioned the figure of 600,000 people out who have left the country. All in all, I think we talk about 1.5 million people containing the whole diaspora. And I think this diversity is an asset and a challenge. I have already mentioned that, of course, we have different political views within the opposition. On the one hand, of course, we want clear answers maybe to how to deal with the Lukashenko regime, but also this is, of course, part of democracy. So what we need is the readiness for open discussion and negotiation. This is also practicing democracy outside the country. And this, of course, we all know democratic processes are time-consuming, very delicate, and it needs really a constant process. And I think this is very important. I would like to mention that the German Marshall Fund, who really has a long-standing experience on supporting the opposition and supporting people inside Belarus and outside. And they have published a very interesting paper at the beginning of this year, The Strategic Potential of Democratic Exiles. So what they try to do is have a look at, thank you, have a look at what kind of impact can the exile community have. And I would like to mention to me, the most important points. So, of course, on the one hand, still reach out to people inside Belarus. On the one hand, this means direct support to people from the opposition who are still in the country, who are not able to publicly voice their views, but who are still active. And this, of course, entails financial support, this entails administrative support. Then, as I've already mentioned, media provide the Belarusian population with sound information on developments inside and outside the country. And I think this is very, very important. And so these media outlets, of although it is so difficult to get access to them, they are still read. And Pavel Latushka, I think, was it who just said already that we have to counter the state propaganda. And this is something that these media do. Then support newcomers in exile. I've already talked about several waves of the exile community. So for newcomers, to help them ease their way when they come, when they go outside the country after they fled Belarus, to help them establish themselves. And I suppose a lot of you here in the room know what that means. Fortunately, I don't know it from own experience. Then a very interesting aspect, I think, is foster the sense of Belarusian identity inside and outside the country. And I think this is very important, and this is also a security aspect if we think of Belarusian sovereignty. And I think this is also something that the Belarusian exile community is very active in. And last, but certainly not least, bring and keep Belarus on the international agenda. And I think this is really what all the different individuals and organizations that I've just listed in general, what they're active in. And what this study also says that, of course, there are certain factors that ensure success or make it difficult. This is the proximity and physical access to the country. And of course, access to the country gets more and more difficult. And very important also is the attitude of the host country. So to what extent do we have a Belarus-friendly environment here in Germany? This goes for the political sphere, but also for the public. And maybe people inside this room can tell us more about how they experience the general mood here in Germany when it comes to Belarus. And what kind of support does it need? I think, of course, there are three types of support that are needed: political support, administrative support, and of course, financial support. Political support. Representatives of the exile community, they need platforms to stage and stages to voice their attitudes. So they have to be invited to events. They have to get the opportunity to talk about their activities, to talk about their views, and their voices must be heard. I think this is very important, and I'm very grateful to the Foreign Office. The Foreign Office also offers various spaces for exile communities, and I think this is very important, and this also is a continuous process. And then we have this administrative support, and I think one of the most important things, of course, are visa issues. And this is, of course, a very important, also very difficult task, but I think we should expect more support from the German government. I think it was also, it was Christina Kamphaus who mentioned in the beginning that in the summer of this year, we heard that humanitarian visas were no longer issued. There was a lot of protest. DGO also protested, and a lot of organizations present here in the room have protested. And it seems as if there was some success to it, but there has been a recent report by Monitor, a TV channel. Very interestingly, they asked the Minister of Interior, so after the reopening of the program, how many humanitarian visas have been issued, and the number is 3. And we talk of the overall number of humanitarian visas, not only for Belarus, but for the whole world. So here, of course, we need more pressure on our ministries, on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and of course on the Ministry of Interior to get more humanitarian visa. But it is not just a question of humanitarian visa, because a lot of people exile also struggle, even if they have a resident permit, if their official documents expire, they really have difficulties to get their residence permits prolonged. And this is also something that has to be addressed. And I know there are official recommendations by the government, but I have heard now from several cases in smaller towns where people are not informed, people in the offices, who have to issue, who have to prolong the visa, they are not informed about these recommendations, so more information has to be given on that. And last but not least, I think it is financial support. And I have already talked about long-term strategies, and this also means we need long-term support. We need long-term support by the government. We also need long-term support by other foundations. And I'm very glad that we have representatives from various foundations here in the room as well. So we need long-term strategies, and they have to be tailored in a certain way to really address the needs of the community. There has to be a certain flexibility. There also has to be a certain flexibility in the accounting. And I know this is very difficult because in most cases we talk of public money, and spending public money, of course, needs transparency. Still, I think there can be a bit more creativity to really tailor funding programs so that they meet really the needs of the exile community. And I think a lot of funding that went to Belarus now has expired. I take the German Academic Service, DAAD, as one example, the German Academic Exchange Service. So no more money can go to Belarus, and I think this money should not be saved, but should go to exile communities in Germany. So I think this is a brief summary, but as I've already said, it would be very interesting here to have your views on what really is needed. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So we need long-term support for the community in exile, community of Belarus in exile. We need a long-term strategy, or at least first steps to be done in order to get changes inside Belarus, the roadmap. And now we would actually like to find out a little bit more about what is going on right now inside Belarus. I mean, is there any room for changes from inside the regime? Because as we heard from Pavel Latushka, these, and I said in the beginning, Belarus really is a security threat right now, and it's about militarization of the public life. So we heard about school kids who have to undergo this militarization, the exercises and so on. The narrative of the Russian world is very, very much pushed now into society. This is when security and ideology actually merge. So the blending of propaganda and militarization, and this is typical for a totalitarian system. So where society is organized around conflict and loyalty to the state. So how would you describe this? Is that, from your perspective, Mr. Kazakevich, long-term political analyst from Politsphera, how would you describe the situation from inside?
Thank you. Initially, I was asked to speak about a general situation in Belarus, and then be focused on view of Belarusian authorities of possible dialogue or communication with the West. So probably it's very difficult to add something regarding the situation in Belarus, because it was described by Latushka, by you, by other speakers. The situation is difficult from a political point of view. It's not transparent. It's very difficult to predict the dynamic of Belarusian-Russian relations. So there is no any signs for political reform or any changes. We just don't see such signs. That it seems that for further 4 or 5 years, the situation will be practically the same if the environment, so some environment of Belarus will not change. Regarding the view that Belarusian authorities have regarding the European Union and regarding possible dialogue or communication, I think that in general details it's rather good described in the report of Artyom. As far as I understand, you try to be realistic as much as possible. Actually, a description can be described as a desirable scenario for Belarusian authorities, because actually it's based on minor concessions, practically no considerable any sustainable concessions, but at the same time considerable and visible concessions from a European Union. So just to summarize, I see that a current approach of the Belarusian authorities regarding European Union, this approach is based on 2 or even 3 main principles. The first principle, no security. The second one, no politics. And the additional one, it's not obligatory, but it's desirable, no neighbors. What does it mean, no security? It means that in general, Belarusian authorities are not ready to speak about essential security issues and problems in the region. Belarus has little, if any, strategic autonomy regarding security issues because of its dependence on Russia. Of course, it's much more comfortable for Belarusian authorities just to exclude these topics and these issues from any communication or possible dialogue, and so on. And the main problem with this strategy is that for European Union, security is the main issue. The most important issue regarding the region, regarding migration and so on, and probably except of migration. Yeah, migration can be discussed. So we see that it's in general it's clear that such issues should be discussed in some broader context. At least Russia, Ukraine, and United States should be involved in this process. But if these issues, security in broader sense, including information security, hybrid attacks, and other threats, are excluded from communication, bilateral communication, it means that the main incentive for communication from EU side is lost. It's very important, yeah, for European Union, and it's absent at least at the beginning of this thinking about possible dialogue. The second thing, it's no politics. It means that yes, Belarusian authorities are not ready to discuss any elections, political competition, political parties, and so on in the country. So their initial position is that European Union should accept the current political system as it is, without any critique and so on. It means a political system without political parties, without independent media, without NGOs, no, at least probably only some limited activity of NGOs can be allowed, and all other restrictions also should be in place. And the main problem this position is that actually it means for European Union, it means that European Union should abandon its initial goal regarding, for instance, sanctions, because many sanctions were designed, taken into consideration some political political events, yeah, in Belarus and repressions. This general redesign of the strategy of sanctions, and even at some extent abandonment of main political principles and some values of European Union. Probably is possible, but very difficult for European Union. But it seems it would be very difficult to get without any concessions from the other side. And if the issues of security are not on the table, so what actually can be discussed? If we speak not about just political values, but about some real things that Belarus can give to European Union. And the third point regarding no neighbors, it means that the general strategy, at least at the moment, we will see how it will evolve, is based on attempts to find some distant friends or distant allies, for instance, United States, or probably Germany, or probably some other countries in Western Europe, just to exclude or to reduce the role of Poland, Lithuania, and Ukraine as a partner of European Union. This approach, it seems that this approach is also unrealistic, because historically we see that these countries actually, I mean, Poland, Lithuania, and at some extent Ukraine, are very important for formulating for elaboration of policy, of European policy towards Belarus. And it's very difficult to imagine how, for instance, Trump will force Poland or Lithuania to do something with Belarus regarding sanctions or any other cooperation. But probably it can be possible. So 3 principles, and what actually Belarusian authorities are ready to provide or ready to give to European Union. First of all, it's political prisoners. More or less they are ready to release a certain amount, and probably even all at some stage. Probably the decrease of repressions, the intensity of repressions. I don't think that they are ready to abandon this practice at all. At least we don't see any signs. But the level of repressions can be reduced, and it will reduce in any rate, in any scenario. Just because the fact that most of politically active entities and individuals in Belarus are suppressed, so we can expect that in general political activity in Belarus will decrease, and the number of repressions will also decrease. Probably some changes in legislation or some practices, but I don't think it's very important for Belarus, taking into consideration the fact that in general laws and written norms are not important if we speak about political issues. And the last but not the least issue, it's migration. Probably it's the only really important issue for European Union, for interests, direct interests of European Union regarding Belarus. And probably this can be some important issue. So just to summarize what I have said, we see some position of contemporary Belarusian government that looks very. We see at least a gap between expectations or readiness of European Union to do any movements, any actions regarding Belarus, and their current initial position. And taking into consideration the great asymmetry regarding power, regarding economic resources, regarding time, and so on, between European Union and Belarus, it seems it's unrealistic to see any real changes without any additional concessions from Belarusian side, especially if some concessions are possible in the sphere of security and related issues. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much for this insight and all our panelists. I think I would like to now open the floor to the audience because, yeah, this is what I thought. We have some questions, some comments, and then at the end I ask, of course, our panelists again to give their final remarks on what has been said also by other panelists. So, Alexandra, please, yeah.
Hello, Alexandra Mamayev. I'm head of International Affairs Committee in the Coordination Council, but also coordinator of people's embassies, like a representative of Belarus Democratic Forces in exile. And we are working very much with the problems that Gabriele Freitag was mentioned. And from my experience, the most three problems of all Belarusians in exile are legalization, mobility, and security. And they are very much connected, because without a valid passport, you can have legal status, you can move around Europe, and without legal status, you also have to lose the status and go to other countries where, that are not safe for Belarusians. So we have already case of Vasil Veremeychik, who was not have legalization in Lithuania, lived to Vietnam, and was deported from then by KGB. Now is imprisoned. And if we also talking about some legalization issues, Belarusians should not be forced to come to Belarus for some documents, for passports, for, I don't know if we're talking about education, for diplomas and so on, because Lukashenka press on all Belarusians with these issues, transform passport to the weapons. And also if we're talking about the German policy, I know that it was established this recommendation for the local governments and local authorities how to work with Belarusians, but after 1 year they are more not effective anymore, because this politics change. And I don't know if I can recommend, but maybe ask if it's possible to make this recommendation public, so they will can be placed on international affair in foreign policy or migration ministry, and all Belarusians can use it and just take this recommendation, go to in every small country with this document, with this recommendation, and it will be much more effective. We have these practices in different countries. We are ready to share with these best practices, and we know that it's very effective. Thank you.
Thank you. That's possible recommendation. So I will collect two more. Yeah, please. There was a. Did you? Yeah. Can you? Did you? Yeah, you said. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
My name is Walter Kaufmann from the Heinrich-Böll-Foundation. Listening to you and looking at the kind of broader picture, there's a certain perception of helplessness and inertia when it comes to the relations between Germany and Belarus, or the situation in Belarus, and also the European Union, except from the humanitarian issues that Gabriele addressed. There is very visible and very easy to feel that the impetus for need, and the urgent need for change. Yeah? But when it comes to political and economic relations, it's hard to understand where should the drive for change come from. Who in Belarus, except for people exiled or being politically persecuted, but who in the regime needs change, for what reason? And who in the EU urgently needs change. Yeah? So, Michael Nowak, you said about the Team Europe. I wonder how coherent is Team Europe when it comes to Belarus? Is there something like a Team Europe? We have many difficulties with the Team Europe when it comes to Russia. I wonder, are there the same spoilers in the Team Europe, or how does this look like? And where do you expect the need for change? So is there something that the regime in Belarus really lacks and really needs, so they have a certain drive?
Okay,
and is there anything the EU really needs now?
Yeah, I think question understood. Thank you. I take Anton Radnikov and Valeria Kovalevsky, yeah, but we have a second round with you. so yeah, to take these two and then we go back to the panel. Mm-hmm.
So, hello, my question is to Mikhail. How do you assess current European policy? It's already for 5 years in place, so it's quite some time. So, strong sides, weak sides, lessons learned. Thank you very much.
How much time do we have?
Oh. Yeah, please.
Thank you. Valery Kovalevsky, Euro-Atlantic Affairs Agency and Coalition for the Release of Political Prisoners in Belarus. First, to Artyom, congrats, huge congrats on the excellent paper. I think you have done a terrific job in structuring something so messy as the Belarusian crisis. And this is a good start for the guidebook for not only Europeans and Americans, but also for Belarusian democratic forces to think about. But actually, my question to you as a cool-headed analyst, like you haven't mentioned much in this paper, democratic forces, their role, their participation. How do you assess the role? Because we've heard here some of the calls to Americans to release people, to Europeans stop repressions, and insisting that there should be agency, or it is there already, agency of democratic forces, but how do you see their role objectively in this process? And the second question to whomever is involved in the formulating the policy on Belarus in Germany or in the European Union, who is on the panel. This is about actually what Anton just mentioned, that there has been 5 years of strategy, of the EU strategy on Belarus. And I'm trying to figure out what it is about, this strategy. Is it about defeating the regime? Is it about resolving the crisis in Belarus? Or is it about supporting democratic movement, democratic aspirations of Belarusians? Because we see that the regime is actually intact. The situation in Belarus is getting worse and worse, kind of deteriorates by every year. And the democratic aspirations of Belarusian people are kind of more or less well supported, but not inside Belarus. Outside, yes. In exile, we can say that there has been actually really good job done. To complicate things, Russia is also looming over our crisis. This is not isolated national borders, and sovereignty and independence of Belarus under significant threat. And so the question, like, this is a very, very messy situation, which affects long-term interests of Belarus, which affects strategic interests of Europe. And what do we do about that? Like, how do we actually start resolving the crisis, not just observing the crisis, not just kind of dancing around it? Because in 5 years, the results are not very optimistic. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So we have questions and comments, and I would like to really give the floor back now to the panelists. So each of you has 3 minutes, I would say. And also, please, we take Artyom first, and then in the order we had in the beginning. And then Mr. Nowak, Freitag, and yeah, so please.
I need a mic. This works perfectly. Let me briefly address the first question, because I think it's very, very important about the who is in Minsk interested in change and who is in the EU interested in change, because it's hard to identify exactly name by name, sector by sector, who would be the driver of change in Belarus. I can, say with the level of, some respect for wholehearted respect for my country, that will be the Belarusian people ultimately who will need to be the driver of change. But if you try to locate it more precisely, I would say that it's going to be private business and the part of the bureaucracy which Pavel Latushka has mentioned as his, I think, first group, or maybe potentially the second group as well, those who are not brainwashed by the ideas of the Russian world. And I see such scenarios, trajectories in the midterm future of Belarus, where the interests of these various groups coincide obviously together with the Belarusian political forces, whoever it will be by that time, but pro-democratic political forces, around the statehood, around the independence, around the values of economic well-being and respect for people by the state. I think these are the issues for potential consensus for post-Lukashenko Belarus. And right now, in such a suppressed and non-transparent environment, it's hard to reach out, directly to these groups by the EU. So that's why EU is speaking to those whom it can reach, the democratic forces, but not with the broader, potential agents of change with Belarus. But I think sooner or later, probably after Lukashenko, we will see emerging different interests pushing for this direction as well. And it's, I think, the job of the EU as well to make sure that these are the kind of interest groups that prevail, not the other ones. Now, on this question on the roadmap and the role of the democratic forces, to be honest with you, Valery, I think that we, of course, thought about this a lot, and it's not that we haven't mentioned democratic forces at all. We did. We mentioned them in the way by saying that nothing in our roadmap requires the EU to downscale, to abandon the support for the democratic forces. This is not about it at all. This is not about delegitimization of Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. This is not about, giving up the support for this civil society and democratic forces. At the same time, the roadmap tried to be the practical, applicable, technical document. And when you think about technicalities, what can be the role of the political actor? It can be either decisive or consultative. It can either have a veto right on the process, or it can be a consultation partner. When it comes to giving democratic forces a veto right over decisions in our process, we deemed it as unpractical and something that will be a no-go immediately for all the sides involved, actually, not just Minsk. When it comes to consultative role, again, consultations need to continue, and we explicitly mentioned one sector of civil society, human rights groups, that need to be constantly, regularly briefing the European Union part of this process in order to be sure that Minsk doesn't cheat. And if they do cheat, the EU should have a flexible mechanism to roll back its pressure back. So human rights groups can bring their expertise to the table. It's quite clear. They're monitoring of repressions, they're monitoring of human rights situation, repressive laws being repealed or not repealed, repressive practices used or not used. But the broader democratic community, what is exactly the contribution, the technical contribution that they can bring to the table? They do not control repression, they do not control sanctions, they do not control any other forms of, any other disruptive and provocative actions by the regime. So then the question gets to the purpose, like what would exactly be the objective of their involvement? If we speak about the national dialogue, well then yes, in the national dialogue it is the democratic forces that need to be part, but the roadmap that we proposed falls so short of addressing such a strategic and high-level issue as national dialogue. And finally, my last point on this. Actually, what I don't buy is the criticism that I already receive is that this roadmap somehow sidelines the democratic forces, because the very fact that 7 pages of Minsk steps, and by the way, if Andrei, you were describing our approach as something that is favorable to Minsk, I actually disagree, because there are 7 pages of quite serious steps that are required from Minsk. But, and some of them I don't think Lukashenko will be ready to do ever. the very fact that most of them are about human rights and political prisoners and avoiding the situation where new political prisoners are being jailed, I would say is an achievement of the democratic forces. Because in no other case you see European Union or the Americans, to that effect, raising the question of political prisoners and human rights so high on agenda in a conversation with a dictatorial regime. Even if you look at the US, Belarusian political prisoners are probably the only group about whom Trump tweets and speaks. He doesn't do it about anybody else. I mean, obviously he calls Bolsonaro a political prisoner in Brazil, but that's another story. The same with the EU. It's a unique example of the success of the democratic forces, and not just of this generation of democratic forces, but decades before. So if our approach in one day becomes operational and actually is employed by the EU, democratic forces can actually claim victory.
Thank you very much. Mr. Novak.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I mean, I was asked to answer a number of quite big questions. I ask you to, or yeah, would like to ask you to bear with me that I can't maybe do it all in 3 minutes. I mean, first thing, I would like to mirror what Mr. Kazakevich said. I thought it was a very good framework to think about the Belarusian regime's approach. Yeah? No security, no politics, and no neighbors. We can talk about that in a minute. But I mean, sort of, if you take everything that is of political significance off the table, the question is what is left for an exchange. So I think our task is to see whether there are areas that one can communicate with the regime about. But again, I'd just like to reiterate what I said at the beginning. We have to stick clearly with our expectations, and we have to communicate them clearly. And I mean, dialogue for dialogue's sake is not a policy. And I mean, some of you may have read or seen that Maskolo and Gloga, Katja Gloga and Georg Maskolo published a very thoughtful book on Germany's Russia policy. I don't want to talk about Russia here, but one of the important thoughts from that is that dialogue for dialogue's sake does not lead anywhere good. So I think when thinking about how to approach the problem, we have to keep that in mind. I do not necessarily see a helplessness or inertia in the European approach. It's more that, of course, we have a policy in place, and we should not stay with it or rest there without thinking about additional, avenues. And as I said at the beginning, such papers as the roadmap can help us, foster the discussion. But at the end of the day, we have to find ways within the established framework. And the framework, if you put it in two phrases, is, as Pavel said, pressure and non-recognition. And then below that, I mean, can you find ways to start a meaningful communication? What Mr. Kaufmann asked, what about Team Europe, and are they together or not? I think in the case of Belarus, you have a limited number of actors, as I see it personally, that really take an interest in Belarus. And it's basically the neighboring countries. And, the Nordics to some extent, especially Sweden, is very active. Then you have Germany and France. And I've probably forgotten one or two, but those are the main actors. So that makes it maybe easier to, think about ways where one could find points of of action. And I think it is very important to have fora like these to foster that. But I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, it's not that we can have a magic wand, and I wouldn't want to misuse the concept of strategic patience as a cover for not doing anything. On the contrary, but we should also make clear to the other side that we will not, just because something is happening, we will throw everything out of the window. That has been agreed upon so far. Last point. Thank you for raising the issue of humanitarian visa, and also to Gabi Freitag for addressing the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on this. I personally see, of course, your point, and I personally see that the question of humanitarian visas is not a question of migration. It's a question of course, humanity and humanism, but even more, it's a strategic foreign policy question. Yeah. So we're very much on one page on that. But I can just invite you to continue lobbying for this worthy issue. Thank you. And on this happy note, over to you.
Yeah, yeah. And if you can, 3 minutes and 3 minutes, then because
certainly.
coffee, I think, is waiting for us.
Yes, and this is what we are doing. Lobby still for it, and thank you very much for adding security as a need that has to be addressed when we talk about the exile community. And also, I think I've already mentioned these recommendations that we have that allow German authorities to prolong, I think, documents that have expired. And I find your suggestion very good, that they really should be widely published. And yeah, so we may talk about that later. I mean, I would be interested really to have your view on to what extent it is possible to reach out to Belarusians inside the country, because I think change also has to come from within. I think regime change from outside does not work. Maybe Germany in 45 was one of the rare examples, so West Germany then starting in 49. But basically, I think regime change from outside is really hard, and what it needs also is the will to change things from inside. And so I would find it really interesting to have your view on to what extent is it still possible to reach out to people in Belarus. I can briefly talk about our experience. I've already mentioned this Forum for Historical Research on Belarus. What we mainly discuss are questions of the politics of history and historiography, memory cultures, and these are highly political issues. As you all know, I think the Russian war against Ukraine tells you to what extent historical narratives are a question of security policies. And so we organize online discussions, and people do still participate. People inside Belarus still participate. They will not actively talk, but we see that they listen to what is said. And I think this is just, I mean, these might be tiny successes, but I think this is what is needed. And this is also something we have to work on. Thank you.
A few words regarding changes in Belarus. No, unfortunately, Belarus is not a fully independent country. It's greatly dependent on Russia. That's why changes in Russia and Belarus are interconnected, at least at a great extent. We can remind, for instance, Solidarity movement in Poland. It was a great movement. It should have, and the regime should have failed. Yeah, but it survived because of Moscow support. Actually, we have the same situation in Belarus, and unfortunately, without changes, external changes, it's very difficult to expect any changes within the country. And regarding your, Valery, question about strategy of European Union, It was mentioned that actually European Union doesn't have any strategy to Belarus. But if we would reconstruct some elements of strategy, it's based on two principles. And these principles are important for all countries except important trade partners. First issue, security. The second issue, humanitarian aid. Regarding Belarus, since 2020, many things were made regarding security. Wall was built at the border, changes in migration policy, visa policy, and so on and so forth. Yes, and it's part of the strategy. The second part, humanitarian aid. And if we speak about support of Belarusian civil society, democratic forces, it's more about aid. And even if you would look at the description of absolute majority of projects, of European projects that concern Belarusian issues, it's about aid. It's not about regime change. Because in general, European Union does not have any mechanism for regime change. And I disagree that the aim of regime change was clearly formulated by European Union in Belarusian case. Support, yes. Support of spread of values, ideas, information, and so on, but not regime change in its at least classical meaning of this concept. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all the panelists for a really insightful, interesting panel. So we now finished that and we will have a coffee break, is that true? And then a quarter to 6, so in like 20 minutes, we will continue with another panel and moderated by Anna Kravchenko from the Friedrich-Naumann Foundation. Thank you again for your participation.
Okay, we will start our second panel for today. My name is Anna Kravchenko. I'm the head of Ukraine and Belarus office of Friedrich-Naumann Foundation for Freedom, based in Kyiv, Ukraine. And today we will discuss the role of democratic Belarus in the regional security architecture. What we will, of course, discuss the current state of affairs. So we will be looking into future, but of course we cannot ignore what is happening today. And today what is happening is, it is day 1335 of Russia's full-scale invasion in Ukraine. And Belarus is considered in Ukraine as co-aggressor, and because it was Lukashenka's regime that set the stage for the full-scale invasion back in February 22. I will later introduce all our panelists today. We have 2 panelists here with us in Berlin, and we have 2 other panelists online. Since our guest, our speaker from Ukraine, has to leave in about 20 minutes, I would suggest we will start with Vadim Halaichuk's keynote. Vadim Halaichuk is a member of Ukrainian parliament, servant of the People Party. He's the first deputy chairperson of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine Committee on Ukraine's integration into European Union. And he is a member of unofficial parliamentary group for democratic Belarus. Vadim, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a shame you couldn't come. Could you maybe give us a perspective, Ukrainian perspective on Belarus? How do you view Belarus as a threat, maybe an opportunity if there is a regime change? And what would you expect also from Belarusian democratic movement? The stage is yours.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, all participants. I am sorry that I'm not there with you. I see some familiar faces, friends. Wish I could have been there, but we have important processes here in the Rada. It's the budget week, and everybody's very, very busy and need to stay here in Ukraine. And again, apologize also for having to leave earlier. but I will be able to stay connected for some time after I finish. So I'll try to make it quick. Belarus, the neighbor, the the people that we have been for centuries together with, and in the recent years have come to a very, very difficult point in our relationships. Half Ukraine, half of Ukrainian people, more or less, believe that Belarus is the the enemy as Russia is. Belarus providing its territory and some other resources, participating in the war against Ukraine. Whereas the second half, also, when asked, what do you think about the situation, would also add to the Belarus, obviously, technical participation in the war against Ukraine, the fact that Belarus is under dictatorship, it's under authoritarian rule, and it's under a lot of Russian pressure. That situation was even reflected in a way in how we in the Verkhovna Rada, in the parliament of Ukraine, look at it. We have two motions registered. One is about recognizing Belarus and Belarus regime and the country as the enemy, as the aggressor state, and demands to bring it to responsibility. And there's a second motion that was also brought by a fairly large support by different MPs to recognize Belarus as an occupied country, occupied by Russia, and under rule of the occupying power as such. Well, both of these motions haven't reached the floor and haven't been debated, quite frankly, for that reason. We don't believe any of those would actually have the necessary majority. So this is a situation that we have at hand, where we, in the society, in the political representation, we don't really have agreed on that very important issue. Who do we think Belarus belongs to in terms of whether it's been free to make its decisions and to choose the path of joining the aggressor, or it had no other choice, so to speak. Of course, Belarus is extremely important for every reason you look at it. I mean, geographically and politically, we all understand that it's in our best interest to have very good relationship, to be together with Belarus. Therefore, we tried very hard to work with Lukashenko regime before the full aggression started, understanding how important it is to keep these communications going. Of course, after the aggression started, all official contacts have been seized. As you know, Ukrainian ambassador has been recalled, although there are several personnel in Belarus. But Belarus still is a very important ground for negotiation efforts. And we talking not, of course, about peace negotiations. None of that is happening, and we don't see it happening anytime soon. But negotiations about different efforts, humanitarian efforts to bring back our fallen soldiers, the bodies of the fallen soldiers, to bring back the children that have been abducted from Ukraine, to bring back the prisoners of war. The exchanges are also happening using the Belarus territory. So Belarus, no doubt, is strategically important for Ukraine and everybody in Ukraine, regardless of how you view Belarus and its participation understands that it's in our best interest to keep the dialogue going with Belarus people, with the people who are like-minded, who see Belarus a democratic country, because that would be the only way that Ukraine can hope to secure its borders with Belarus. We also see that Belarus, Belarusian people, well, those that we communicate with, and mostly those are, of course, the representatives of the Belarus opposition, also see the importance of these relationships with Ukraine. We have many Belarus soldiers joining Ukraine military, fighting alongside. We have many in Belarus opposition who are very active on the international scene, coming together with us to talk to our partners in Europe, in the US, around the world, telling the truth about the atrocities of Lukashenko regime and the importance of supporting Belarus opposition. We work closely with different representatives of informal NGOs and groups that are still working in Belarus to keep these connections and to try to spread the word that here in Ukraine, yes, of course we have a big problem with Belarus joining Russia. We see, well, it's not just us. That's how the international law sees it. That providing the territory and other material support for aggressor is participating in the aggression, and that's a legal fact that has to be addressed. And by the way, there's also a discussion on what approach we develop in order to hold those responsible for aggression in Belarus, and whether that should be the exact same approach as we use to the Russians or a different one. And those motions that I described, they actually go around explaining what our position would be on that issue too, how to hold those in Belarus responsible for the aggression responsible, what mechanisms should be used. And of course, the main path to that is that we would support and we would ask our partners in Europe and all around the world, the democratic forces in Belarus, because that's the main hope, that one day the regime will fall. One day the people will see that the way forward would be to change their country, to change the path to democratic pro-European path. And of course, Ukraine as the country that is now on its European path and hopefully will be joining the European Union in due time, will definitely be a very good partner, very good example for Belarus. And of course, economically. I mean, if you look at the map, Europe needs Belarus, Ukraine needs Belarus. In order to unite Europe, in order to realize those very ambitious projects that we have, the infrastructure projects, first of all, we need Belarus. So with that, of course, we are very much open to discussions with our dear friends from the Belarus opposition. We have created this, it's called Interfaction Group for Democratic Belarus, for that specific reason, so that we have the exchanges going, so that we talk to each other regularly, twice, three times, even more often. We hold different events, roundtables, forums. We have the Ostrosky Forum approaching in a couple of weeks here in Kyiv and in Lviv, where again we will be discussing the state of play. We will be talking about the plans. We will be talking how Belarus opposition feel about them being welcomed or not so welcomed in Ukraine. Every now and then we have those problems too. We trying to work with each individual from Belarus opposition, from refugees from Belarus, and we have a very sizable. I believe it is number one by the number of people, community in Ukraine. And of course, we see it as our obligation to provide whatever assistance is necessary to those who have joined Ukrainian military. Those are, of course, our main, so to speak, counterparts in terms of discussing the future of our relationships, the future of Belarus. I will sum up with the call to all of us who are in these discussions, who believe that Belarus has a democratic future, who believe that Russian grip over Belarus can be broken, to work on uniting all these forces, to work on bringing together people, the like-minded people who see it the same way. We have seen examples of Belarus opposition working together, but we have seen examples of Belarus opposition representatives not liking each other very much. Let's put it that way. And that, of course, doesn't help our common cause. So we also see our role, and again, I call on everybody present here to work in that direction, so that we all come together, that we all realize that the enemy is outside. The regime that causes the pain, the atrocities towards its own people, towards us here in Ukraine, Russia, who directly attacked Ukraine and slowly is engulfing Belarus. The enemy is outside, and that's what we should do: unite our forces to fight our common enemy. Thank you for this opportunity. I will have to leave, but will be able to join back in about 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Vadim. Then I will continue with our second panelist who is online with us today. This is Michał Kobosko, member of European Parliament from Poland, Renew Europe Group, and vice chair of the Delegation for Relations with Belarus. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. Mr. Kobosko, in September 2025, we saw I will just call it the great drone incursion from the Belarusian airspace to Poland. So there were around 20 Russian drones coming to Poland from Belarus. I've read that Belarus warned Poland shortly before the drones came to Polish airspace, stating they were affected by jamming or some electronic warfare, so they just went astray. So this incident brings Belarus again back into the security consideration of the European Union and of course of Poland. So from your perspective as European parliamentarian, but you are also from Poland, how are those developments actually reshaping EU's approach and also Polish stance towards Belarus? How does it influence approach, and what does it actually suggest about Belarus' actual level of control vis-à-vis Moscow?
Thank you for the question. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. Thank you to the forum, to the foundation for having me in this panel discussion. Yes, it's a very timely question, definitely. You mentioned what happened a month ago, but before answering this, let me just say that the only reason why I'm not there with you is that I'm in Strasbourg right now, and we are just opened the next plenary session of the European Parliament. That's the only reason. It's a pity I couldn't be there in Berlin. I have to tell you that each and every session of the European Parliament, we're having at least one day of discussions and debates about Ukraine, about the war. It's not only expressing our solidarity and our support. I understand that matters to you a lot, but we are discussing and focusing mainly on what else we can do on our side to support you, to increase the level of sanctions, or add sanctions against Russia and against Belarus, Lukashenko's Belarus as well. This is what we can do on our side. First, to keep aiding and supporting Ukraine, military support, financial support, discussing finally about using the frozen Russian assets, which I believe this is one of the key topics nowadays, and we have to push even more the European Commission and our European friends to discuss how can we use these assets to support you in your efforts. So Ukraine is our topic, I would say, on a daily basis. Belarus, not that much. I would say for many of my Western European colleagues and friends, Belarus does not matter that much, unfortunately, because they already see Belarus as a part of the Russian bloc, if you like, or a country which is under direct control of Putin. So they say, okay, why are we spending time and our energy to discuss Belarus while this country, in a way, is lost? Definitely, I do not agree with such a point, such a position, and it's not only me, it's not only the Polish delegation. I believe that the closer you are to the Belarus, the better you understand the meaning, the importance, the strategic position of Belarus in the whole of the regional and European picture. This week we will be discussing and hopefully adopting the resolution of the European Parliament on the situation in Belarus 5 years after the fraudulent, the sham elections of 2020. We'll be also hosting here in Strasbourg Svetlana and Sergei Tikhanovsky, both of them. They will be visiting us, will be our special guests during our debates and direct meetings. So it's really important, plays an important role that we are not forgetting Belarus, and we are discussing with the Belarusian opposition. Me personally, as you were so kind to mention, I'm the deputy chair of the delegation for relations with Belarus. I'm always adding for the relations with the free Belarus. This is not about relations with the Lukashenko regime. We are not talking to Lukashenko regime as European Union. We do not see any reasons to talk to him. You mentioned the incident a month ago, over 20 drones flying into territory of Poland. Incident, well, basically you should not call it an incident. It was a very long, well-planned operation, military operation against Poland. That was not a coincidence, that was not an incident. And obviously it was the Russian element of the Russian aggression and hybrid war against the West, against the Western European countries. But definitely that would not happen without acceptance of Lukashenko himself, without acceptance or approvals of the Belarusian regime. So yes, we remember that Belarus sent a kind of a warning 5 minutes before this attack, and they warned us, but it was not sincere, to put it mildly, to put it in a political way. It was not an act of a goodwill, but was rather, another attempt to confuse us, confuse the others, and look in a way responsible. But the fact is that Lukashenko regime is still helping Russia's aggressive actions, and definitely, let me be a bit blunt here. Unlike President Trump, we are not naive, and we cannot be naive while we talk to Lukashenko, because this incident with drones, that was the first one, but nobody can assure that this was the last one incident of that kind. This demonstrates definitely Belarus' complicity, not the independence. Europe has no other choice but to reject any normalization with Minsk while repressions in the country continue. So dialogue with the regime without real reforms and without releasing all political prisoners only strengthens Russian leverage in the region. So this incident with drones shows how Belarusian territory is now a forward base, let me name it this way, a forward base for Russian military experimentation. A democratic Belarus, which we hope that will materialize one day, would mean one less platform for the Russian aggression on the EU eastern flank. So that's basically where we are. So the whole thing about the drones was definitely, as I said, not an example of a goodwill, but that was just another example showing you how dependent Lukashenko is on Russia, that he couldn't refuse to allow these drones fly from the Belarusian territory to the Polish territory. So we know who we are facing, and we are fully aware of that, and we have to be very serious about that. Thank you very much for the question.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Koboska. But I will just ask another question for you. So you mentioned the notion you will be discussing this week or adopting, hopefully, in the parliament. At the same time, you are also saying there will be no dialogue with Lukashenko. So notion, I mean, it's nice, but it's still, they're just words. So what practical steps, especially after the, okay, I will not call it incident, the drone incursion, what practical steps will the EU take, will Poland take as a part of Europe to strengthen security resilience of European Union from Belarus without legitimizing Lukashenko?
Well, thank you for this question. I said that we are not having any dialogue with the Lukashenko regime. I have to admit that obviously there are diplomatic channels of communication, and this will exist, and that's pretty obvious. What I'm saying is that we do not have any kind of a normal relations with Lukashenko regime or with the Lukashenko parliament, because there is simply no way to just sit down and discuss important issues where you are seeing that you have not at all any democratic values behind Lukashenko, or he's simply an authoritarian usurper who's not a legitimate president of the country. So therefore, it's really hard to talk to him. Yes, you're very right. We have to care a lot about our own resilience, our own security, and I wouldn't say that I'm happy, but it's really good that finally the whole of Europe did start to understand that Europe has to take care about its eastern border, the border of the eastern flank of both the NATO and the EU, that it's in the interest of the whole of the European Union to invest more into eastern border fortifications, either physical or virtual, or as they call it, the anti-drone walls or anti-drone structures that are being planned and constructed, that this is our common interest. It's not only about the neighboring countries, about the Baltic states or Poland. It's definitely our joint issue to be ready to deter our eastern side aggressors with the means that we are having. Because this incident with the drones flying to Poland, but there were also other incidents with drones flying to Romania or into Baltic states, this lets us better understand that they have no limits. There are no limits, and either we are ready or we might be surprised with any kind of aggression action against us anytime soon. So on the military side, yes, we are doing a lot to fortify our eastern borders. We are having new funds from the European Union to invest more into the eastern shield. There will be massive investments into anti-drone installations, because we see that the war is changing and the means being used by the aggressor are changing as well. So that's one side is the military side, and the other side obviously is the economic side. I mean the sanctions closing the loopholes, the existing loopholes in the sanctions, because there are many. And finally, the European Commission, Brussels, started realizing this, that yes, we were pretty effective with a number and the scale of sanctions that were introduced. It's just the problem that there are many holes in them, that there are many easy ways to bypass the sanctions, to use other countries as transit countries for the products. There are some ways to bypass, for example, the sanctions against the Belarusian fertilizers, which were and are a very serious problem, not only for the Polish farmers and for Polish agriculture. And then there are also other areas. Let me just mention the crypto assets, the cryptocurrencies, and the virtual money and the digital means that are being used by the Lukashenka regime. We have to do much more trying to block the Lukashenka regime from using the crypto assets and the tokenization, if you like, as a way to bypass sanctions, because they are doing this on a daily basis, and we have to do much more to be effective in protecting ourselves against them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kobosko. Our next panelist is Alexandra Mamaeva. She already introduced herself briefly, but I'll just, if you haven't heard, if you don't know her, she's a member of Coordination Council, and she is head of International Affairs Committee and the chair of the delegation of Belarusian Democratic Forces to the Parliamentary Assembly, the Council of Europe. So, Alexandra, last week there was a meeting of the Parliamentary Alliance for Democratic Belarus in Paris, and I'll just quote, so I don't say anything wrong. So there was a Paris memorandum signed about the support of Belarus, and there was a point, it notes, the memorandum notes that the threats to regional security caused by the policies of the Lukashenko regime will remain until the socio-political crisis in Belarus is resolved. From your perspective, is there any plausible scenario in which Lukashenko remains in power, but somehow manages to distance himself from Putin and from his war? Or is the mutual interdependence, or let's say, mutual interdependence between Russia and Belarus so strong that this scenario, any of those scenarios, are just unrealistic? And how do you personally define the resolution of like a resolved socio-economic crisis in Belarus?
Thank you very much for the invitation, and honor to be here and talk with you. I think that yes, we should think on Belarus like on point of regional security. So it's not Belarus didn't means so much like it was, because Belarus it's a really point very important in regional security. If we're talking about Ukraine, we often heard that only after victory of Ukraine, Belarus can become independent. But we can also think from the other side that if Belarus will become democratic, it will really help Ukraine to, in this war. If we're talking about Lukashenko regime, we have to understand that he is already a security threat to European Union. We were talking also today about hybrid attacks, about creating artificial migrant crisis, about kidnapping also European citizens and using them like a political prisoners to become, reducing sanctions. We are talking about launching Russian drones from his territory. And I think it's very crucial preparing for a new war against European Union together with the Kremlin. And it is reality. I don't think Lukashenko can be independent in this situation. I don't think that reducing some sanctions will create it to the partner, and that it will be not, I don't know, treat for European security anymore. Lukashenka and Putin are preparing to new war against European Union. My colleagues from Belpol can provide evidence for this, and in few years, not much, less than 5 years, they will be ready for this war. And we should to think about regime Lukashenka in this perspective. He is not neutral. He is enemy of European Union. We also understand that the future European security really need Belarus, but democratic, independent Belarus, because we're also talking, that it's enough to understand this, it's enough just to look on the map. I was a few weeks ago in Ukraine, participating in the meeting of Lublin Triangle, and our idea is to realize that it have to be Lublin 4 angle, including Belarus, because it's impossible to create stability without Belarus. And eastern border of Europe should be not on Belarus, between Belarus and Poland, but it have to be between Belarus and Russia. This have to be line of security and border of security for European Union. And it will be, I think, much more cheaper, and effective to have border then, and not to build all these walls now. But I also understand the street for security now. So if we're talking what can European Union to do now, what steps can be do now in this? It's for me, it's fighting for the Belarusian people, because if they will stay together with Russia, they in 10 years will be became Russian people. And they, if we're talking about this possibly war, they will enemy of European Union. And our goal is to stay them Belarusian, because this Belaruskast, I don't know in English, it's a European side, and it's create Belarusian in the natural supporter of Europeans and Europeans' value, like now we are support also Ukraine. Second is start provide alternative for Belarus. So we really need to understand that not only Russia have a strategy for Belarus, because Russian strategy is to destroy Belarus, destroy all Belarusians, and just use our territory and our people in their imperialistic wars. But we need the strategy from European Union, that European Union will be open for Belarus, for Belarusian after regime will fall. And I think that we need to talk about long-term strategy of European Union towards Belarus. And also I think we need to, NATO also have to have this strategy for Belarus, because they don't have it yet. And we need to discuss how Belarus can be a part of NATO in the future, or European security system in the future, and also European Union in the future, and establish some roadmaps and preparing for this now, not only from Belarusian side, because we do this job, but also together with our colleagues. Maybe one of this point is also to enable Belarusian to contribute to European security now. So we are talking about international legions in Europe when Belarus can be a part. So our partners also was do some research on this, and Belarusians are ready to to fight in Polish army, in Lithuanian army, but it's impossible to do this. But Ukraine was changed this situation, legislation in, 3 or 5 days. So I think it's possible also in Europe. One more thing, if you're talking about some long-term strategy, we need to understand and guarantee for Belarus energy security. Because we understand that Russia uses gas consumption and oil consumption like a weapon. And we understand if the first democratic election in Belarus will be in situation without light and heat in the houses. So some Russian proxies will be will be in power, or some populists that say, "Okay, I will do like it was before." So we asking European Union to secure this, guarantee this energy security. We already have the plan by our expert. It is technically possible. It will take only 6% of all European energy consumption. And we also understand that only possibility and declaration that European Union will guarantee this energy supplies to Belarus will lower much this risk that Russia will really do this. And we have this example with Moldova, for example. And the last one is to include Belarus in Ukraine recovery strategy, because if we will close all this possibility in infrastructure and some cooperation in the future, it will be much more complicated, much difficult, and much expensive to include in the future Belarus here. So, like a conclusion, yeah, we need this alternative, and it also will help Belarusian to find again Lukashenka regime in Belarus. And we need long-term European strategy for integration of Belarus. And I think that if Europe will see Belarus like a part of European Union in the future in 10, 15, 20 years, so in any policy toward Belarus, they should ask, will this help Belarus to include Belarus to the European Union or not? Because tactically, it's much more easy to build walls. But if we think about long-term strategy, it's we need to integrate Belarusian and open Europe for Belarusian to make this goal closer.
Thank you, Alexandra. Before I ask you another question, just wanted to mention about Belaruskas. The visitors of the last year's Berlin-Belarus Future Forum actually had a great glimpse of Belaruskas, because we showed a film by our colleague from Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung about Belaruskas. And I think it was, as he called it himself, a blockbuster about Belarus. Alexandra, you mentioned NATO, you mentioned European Union. So, speaking for Belarusian Democratic Forces, you as a member of Coordination Council, so what is your stance on future security architecture of a democratic Belarus? Do you think that Belarus should join NATO as a collective defense mechanism or alliance, and also European Union? So is this your position?
Yes, it's my position. It's my dream from, I don't know, for 30 years, I think, that in some time I will have a European Union passport. But it have to be also Belarusian passport, I think. So yeah, for me, European integration is the only possibility that Belarus will stay democratic. Because if we it's, I don't know, it's like a legal framework. It's not only about investment, it's not only about some stability and growing, but for me, it's about legislation. That in any case, if any authoritarian leader can come to the power in the future, but it will be not catastrophic for the country like it's now with the Lukashenka regime. If we are looking for I don't know, Slovakia or for Hungary, yeah, we understand that despite this urban politics, Hungary stay a democratic country with elections and so on. And there is this legal framework that stay it more or less democratic, but democratic. And for me, European Union is this guarantee that we will not have in the future the same situation. The same with NATO. I understand that also for European Union, it's important to understand that if he invests in Belarus, if there is some infrastructure project and so on, that this investment have to be secured. So for first, we talking about security, and for the second about investment to this country. And democratic forces are already create and accept declaration about European future of Belarus. And this year we also accept this declaration about security for Belarus, including this ambition to be a part of European and a transatlantic system of security. So yeah, for me it's real NATO and European Union, but we have to discuss all this with people inside Belarus, because now it's not
exactly
easy.
That would be my last question. Then you, Valery, get to speak. Would that be, for example, NATO membership? Would that be a part of the national dialogue that Pavel Latushka just mentioned in his speech today? Do you think that Belarusian people, how do they feel about the idea of being a part of NATO?
I think that now they look on the NATO like for the enemies because of propaganda, because all they know about NATO, that NATO is a reason of war in Ukraine, as NATO was bombing Belgrade. And I think that it's all, because lack of information about NATO, lack of information what it is, that it's not about war, but about defense, that it's every country can I don't know, enter NATO and go out from this organization, like France, for example, was do. But here is the same situation, maybe even worse, like with European integration, because we know that this number is stable. Around 25% of Belarusian support European integration, but I think that it's not least that this number it's not lower than this, but this number can increase very quickly, like we saw in August 2020. It was more than 30% support, and this meaning was changed in, I don't know, in few weeks. So I think we need some information campaign from Belarus Democratic Forces maybe, but also from our partners from NATO, from European institution about European Union, because it's also lack of information, and regime tried to arise all these, I don't know, blew these tables that it was financed by European Union about all support of Belarus during all this year. So we really need to talk with people inside Belarus why it's important, and I think if it will be possibility, and if they will understand that it's possible, that they are welcomed, I think that this support will be really growth.
Okay, thank you, Alexandra. Valery Kovalevsky, former member of United Transitional Cabinet and Executive Director of Euro-Atlantic Affairs Agency. So, from the name of the agency you are executive director of, and from your previous statements, I assume you are rather transatlantic integration of Belarus. So do you think NATO, and of course the European Union, should prepare for every possible scenario? Do you know if there are some preparations that we can discuss? Alexander just mentioned a roadmap, that NATO should prepare a roadmap for scenarios in Belarus and maybe a potential membership of Belarus in the NATO. So how would such a roadmap look like from your perspective? And don't you think that development of a NATO roadmap for Belarus would be interpreted, first of all, by Russia as some kind of offensive redeployment of NATO. And what I just asked Alexandra, how do you think people in Belarus would think about NATO developing a roadmap for Belarus?
Thank you, Anna, and thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this conversation. But before that, many thanks to organizers. And we see this lineup of organizations who have supported the forum. This shows that Belarus is appreciated, its role is appreciated, and the future is seen optimistically. I also want to thank co-panelists for insightful, informative remarks. Very important to see your contribution as well into this conversation. And yes, you're right, Anna, that a year and a half ago almost, I set up this organization with a focus on Euro-Atlantic integration for Belarus in the long run. And this certainly includes cooperation with the European Union, with NATO. But we also realized that these are very long-term prospects for Belarus, not only because this is a complicated process, but also because we have to be there. We have to be in Belarus in order to launch the process of preparation, of informing people in Belarus about the importance of being in cooperation with this organization. At this point of time, both the EU and NATO are sometimes ridiculed, sometimes demonized, but their image is definitely distorted by propaganda, and for good reason, because both these organizations are seen as a threat by the regime of Lukashenka, endorsed and supported by Putin's regime. Therefore, there will have to be a very, very profound work in order to inform Belarusians about the value and importance of both organizations. At the same time, I think we do not have to aim that high as to declare that Belarus must become a member of NATO or member of the European Union at once. There are many different stages and levels of cooperation for any country with both unions, with both alliances, and I think that Belarus also needs to properly analyze the pros and cons of participation in both of these organizations, in both of these unions. We can see that a number of European countries actually don't rush to join either NATO or the European Union, but instead they maintain very close partnerships, strategic partnerships with NATO or the European Union. And I think this is the way for us to go as well. But before that, we have to resolve the problem of Belarus not being a democratic nation, Belarus being a dictatorship that is not only a domestic problem since 2022, or rather I would say like since 2021, when the Ryanair flight was hijacked. Belarusian regime has become a threat to international peace and security. And since then, this is a much more complicated problem to the international community, but also to the Belarusian society, how to resolve this. So at this point of time, I think it is no secret that Belarus is a source of problems for the entire region. It has become instrumentalized, and I would even say weaponized by Russia in many respects. The migration crisis was and remains the most obvious ones since 2021. Using Belarus as a launchpad for the aggression against Ukraine has become a very low point for Belarus as an independent nation, which has never been in conflict with Ukraine, just like with any other neighbors. Except for Russia. It is with Russians that there have been numerous wars between Belarus. But nevertheless, at the moment, we have to be thinking how to not deteriorate the situation in Belarus, how to contain it. And it is not necessarily that Russia has to bring 100,000 troops to Belarus in order to attack and threaten our European neighbors. With the hybrid warfare, we can see that can be just a group of people with drones who suddenly create havoc in the democratic societies of our neighboring states. the nature of democracy sometimes can be vulnerable, that this is the free media, this is transparency, access to information, and this incident or operation of Russians who sent these drones into Poland has shown how quickly it can be a shocking experience for governments, for societies, sending the shock waves across the entire continent, not only limited to the boundaries of Poland. We have already seen these operations in Denmark, and again, 1, 2, 3, 5 drones, and suddenly the entire country and the entire continent is absorbed by this problem. So at this point of time, the question is like, what can we do in order to reduce threat from Belarus, or at least to contain it, so that it does not grow further? Russia and the Lukashenko's regime have made a lot of efforts in order to build the foundation, military political foundation, for Belarus to be further used in order to threaten Europe. And it is in our ability, I believe, not to let them build the house on this foundation, not to let them use Belarus as a weapon against the European family. So at this point of time, I would break this into kind of talking about the timeline of efforts in order to secure Belarus, in order to reduce the threat from Belarus, rather. I think we should be thinking about how to not let Russians use Belarus further in attacking our neighbors, and in this regard, we have to be mindful of these hybrid attacks, about the intent to deploy nuclear weapons in Belarus, and about using migration crisis in order to destabilize situation in our neighboring countries. The second is sort of close future, I would say, and this is about the sustainable peace for Ukraine. It is impossible to imagine that Ukraine will live in durable and lasting peace if Belarus remains under control of Russia. And therefore, when I hear conversations, when I hear analysis about just a sustainable peace for Ukraine, I have not heard much of conversation about the role of Belarus and what could be done in order to not allow the situation in Belarus deteriorate, so that Russia has much stronger control over our country. And of course, sooner or later, there will be a moment when the war is over, and there will be a conversation about post-war security architecture in Europe, and there will be a question of what's going to be the role of Belarus in this equation, who's going to represent Belarus, and who's going to talk about the interests, national interests of Belarus. At the moment, we understand that Lukashenko is firmly in control over our country. And therefore, in my opinion, it is also necessary to ensure that Europe engages with Lukashenko in order to find ways not to allow this threat to grow in our country. And this is one of the factors that undermines sovereignty and independence of Belarus, the reduced presence of Europe now in our country. We have to be thinking about this, how to bring back this presence, not only political and diplomatic, but also in terms of finding the ways to run an outcome-based policy in Belarus. Because through these exchanges about different perspectives on norms, on principles, on values, we have seen that sometimes they can be divisive, they can bring some dividing lines between nations and the European Union. However, when we think about practical outcomes, when we think about practical work on joint efforts, this is something that could bring our nations together and could sort of bring back some of the understanding, at least not even speaking about trust, but some of the understanding about mutual interests, needs and concerns. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Valery. I have a question for the technical colleagues here. Do we have Vadim Galachuk with us? Because I don't see him. Vadim, are you with us? Can you hear us? Are you here?
I am, yes.
Oh, great, excellent, because we didn't see you on the screen. Excellent. Okay, safe driving, please. I would then now just open the floor for questions. I hope, Vadim, you will also be able to take a question and answer if there are questions from the audience. So please.
Sure.
Hier vorne ist eine Frage.
Andrei Novak, Alliance for European Security, Berlin. Hi, Vadim. Good to see you again. But my question is to Mr. Kobosko. And you've mentioned, obviously, the drone attack on Poland and the general picture for Belarus that could be a threat as part of the Russian threat. And right now we have a new operation, Eastern Sentry, where also German Eurofighters are involved, which is a positive development, and it's spanning across like the eastern flank of NATO, and also you've mentioned the drone wall, but you also in Poland are building the East Shield. And that's as far as of now, it's a national effort. It's not a European or a NATO effort. And similarly, in the Baltic countries, the Baltic Defense Line is being developed. How do you? I mean, after all, Article 5 is defended on that line right now. Even if Belarusians would like to be this line to be somewhere else farther east in the future, but right now Article 5 is defended there, and that also means German national security. And shouldn't these projects of East Shield and Baltic Defense Line and what's going on in southeastern Europe as well be a pan-European project of all of Europe, or at least European NATO members? That should be funded and manned and built together. How do you assess this possibility? Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe there is another question for Mr. Kobosko, so he can answer both questions. Yeah, there is another question for you.
Yeah. I'm Eva Quistorp, former member of the European Parliament, and I'm very happy to hear my Polish colleague. I was working for the enlargement of the European Union in the 90s and was member of the USSR delegation, so I visited Belarus and Ukraine in that area, and I'm now member of the Ukraine lobby of the European Parliament. So maybe by my experience I'm a little bit more modest with what we can do in our current dangerous times. But I would relate to the security question of Andrei, but knowing that there are big conflicts within the European Union and within the European Parliament, because as far as I know, it has not very much improved, that Western Europeans like France and Spain and Italy feel very far away from Belarus and very far away from Ukraine, and even now. So I would think, by experience, not by my idealism, that maybe a working group related to the EU and to the European Council and the European Parliament, which specializes in a group for security with the Baltic countries, with Poland, Germany, and maybe Austria and some Balkan countries in it, but that I think we would need a specialized group and not always have the vision all Europe is doing it, because I think we need common interests in a specialized group to convince the rest of the West Europeans how important the security situation with Belarus is. The other thing, I find it very strange in a situation where we are not very powerful to support the opposition in Belarus and to stop Putin, and now we have the Trump-Putin connection, that maybe we should not debate how Belarus is becoming member of NATO and EU, but couldn't there be some other examples of a sort of federation or of neutrality or things like that, at least for Belarus? So debate some concepts so that we do not give Putin or his propaganda machine an argument, but couldn't it be serious to think about what they even debate now about Gaza and some similar regions, something in between, so that the only solution for Belarus' sovereignty and independence must not be NATO membership.
Thank you. Mr. Kobosko, please.
Right, thanks so much. I believe altogether these are three questions. I try to address briefly each of them. On the current activities project, like the Eastern Sentry operations of the NATO, then the Eastern Shield of Poland and the Baltic front line. Yes, these are the operations of the individual EU member states. We are doing this because we simply see no other choice, that we have to invest a lot. It's not that we are that happy that we are investing billions of zloty or euro into the defense side, but we simply see no other choice, specifically that we saw such incidents as this one from September with the drones, and this incident and the way we addressed it and the way we reacted is showing that we are simply not fully ready to deter the aggressors. And we, as you may know, in the Poland case, we were shooting down some of the drones with the missiles fired by the F-16s, F-35s, and this is simply not the best possible way to address the drone issue or the drone challenge. So we believe that firstly that we need to do much more on that, and secondly, yes, that we have to have a pan-European support here. We are hearing many voices from Brussels, from President von der Leyen, from the Commissioner Kubilius, or the High Representative Kaja Kallas. It seems that we are seeing a much better understanding that this is a common issue, that this is a common challenge. And as we are starting to discuss the next MFF, the multi-annual financial framework, so the budget of the European Union, we see some funds which are to be supporting such projects as this project on the eastern border, eastern flank. We had Madame von der Leyen visiting Polish border with Belarus pretty recently as she was touring the eastern flank countries. So there's much more of not only interest and support towards the eastern member states when it comes to the security and defense issues, and I hope that that would really translate into very specific financial support, that these are the common project, as we are currently having a very new project called SAFE, the 150 billion euros on the development of the defense industry in the European Union, and 1/3 of this amount will be spent by Poland and projects in Poland. So we see much more need to have a very clear, specific financial, mainly financial support on this side. So the trend is changing. I hope it will start changing even faster. When it comes to the special working group, that's a pretty similar question. Also, whether we could also sit down and discuss the issues of Belarus. That might be a good idea. As I told you, not that many of my Western colleagues are fully and really interested in the issues related in Belarus, because they do not believe it's such a relevant country, or that matters so much when we discuss about the security of the region. We do believe and we think differently. We believe that Belarus is a part of the security or currently insecurity system that is creating a real threat to all of us. So it's not that we just postpone or forget about Belarus for a couple of years and then we sit down again. Now it's a high time to support the free Belarus and the Belarusian opposition right now. We are discussing, I mentioned the MFF, the next EU budget. We see some risks here because in the previous budget, in the current budget, some 34 million euros were spent to support Belarusian NGOs, so the free media. And there is a plan to cut down this amount by half in the next MFF to just 17 million. So we are trying to persuade the Commission that that would be a very wrong decision. And specifically, at the time when the Trump administration is cutting down the support, the USAID and other American institutions, their support also for the free Belarusian movement. So we are encouraging Commission not to change, not to cut or to reduce the amount spent on supporting the Belarusian free movement. And finally, the thing that you mentioned and this whole discussion about the future membership of Belarus in either NATO or the EU, well, I agree that that would have to be a gradual process, definitely. That would not happen overnight, and that would be even a bit naive to start such a discussion today. I mean, look, we in Poland, we were also dreamers. We are also dreamers once in 1989, when some of us believed there is a chance for Poland and other Central European countries to join the Western civilization, to leave the Eastern Bloc, where we spent half a century behind the Iron Curtain, and to join the EU and the NATO. Not many people in Poland believed in that at that time, because they said, look, we spent half a century here, we were part of the Soviet bloc, of the Warsaw Pact, and how can we even imagine? So yes, many people in the West of Europe were telling that it would be the right way to treat Poland as a kind of a neutral country. Poland and Central Eastern Europe should become some kind of a gray zone or a neutral country. Jumping to today, I would say there is less and less space for a gray zone in Europe nowadays. You're either black and white, and it's not our decision, it's not that we decided so, it's just that we have an aggressor in the East, we have a country which wants to conquer, to reinstall what was formerly a Soviet sphere of influence, and we cannot just let it go. We cannot just agree to that. So while I do understand, and I also believe that would be a long process for Belarus, as it will be a pretty long process for Ukraine as well, after the war ends, finally, to join either the EU or the NATO, but I believe that you need to have dreams, and you need to have dreams and work hard on making them materialize. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Unfortunately, our panel has to come to an end because I already see the members of the band waiting to set up the scene for the concert. Thank you so much, our panelists. Thank you, Alexander. Thank you, Valery. Thank you, Vadim. Thank you, Mr. Kobosko, for joining us. I think we can continue this discussion later during the dinner reception after the concert. But for now, the stage has to be set up for the band. Please stay with us. Please don't go away. I'm sure you will enjoy the concert. Thank you very much.